Welcome to the Archives Podcast. This podcast serves the goal of helping special operations veterans share stories about their time in service and helping listeners understand the unique challenges that come with being in special operations. This is episode 1, and for it, we have Dylan, a former United States Army Ranger who served in 3rd Ranger Battalion and completed 7 combat deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq. Today, he's going to be sitting down with me for an interview about his early life, growing up into the Army, and going on to deploy during the height of the global war on terror. Before this episode starts, I'd like to ask you all to like, comment, and share. Most importantly, subscribe and click the bell notification so you receive updates on new and upcoming episodes. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. Have a great day. All right, man. How's it going? How's your day going right now?
Yeah, it's pretty good. Got up, off, and did some school work, and just chilling now.
All right, man. Appreciate you coming on to the pod. I know that we set this up really hastily, so I appreciate you coming on. Whenever you could.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, man. So, we can just start off with, your early life. You can go into as much depth as you want with that, and then we just go from there.
Sure. So, let's see. I guess we'll start at the beginning. I was born on Fort Benning, Georgia.
Okay.
My dad at the time, he was a West Pointer. He was in the 82nd for a little bit, and then he was actually at Fort Benning as a basic training executive officer.
Okay.
And he was at a basic training graduation, and he heard that Ranger Regiment, well, at the time it hadn't formed into regiment yet. This was like 84.
Yeah.
He heard that they were looking for a S3 air. So pretty much a air planning operations guy.
Okay.
And so he went down there and volunteered, and they put him through the selection. They had back in the day it was called ROPE.
Okay.
And so it was like the officer's version of RIP. So he went through that whole process. And then he became the first regimental S3 air that they had when they formed the regiment.
Okay.
So when they formed 375, he actually graded them on their airfield seizure. So kind of a little bit of a connection to 375 for me.
Okay. So if you don't mind, for the listeners, what is ROPE? What does that consist of?
So ROPE back in the old days it's very similar to RIP, which was the Ranger Indoctrination program.
Okay.
ROPE was like the Ranger orientation program, because at the time, and still today, officers that go to Ranger Regiment, they have to be volunteers. They have to be recommended to go. They have to get, a recommendation from their battalion to go. So for an officer, it's very hard to get into Ranger Regiment. A lot of people don't realize that. To be an officer in regiment, you have to really be squared away. Like, you can't go there and be a fuck up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although, as a lieutenant, like if you were a lieutenant, you could probably go and be a fuck up because everyone's going to expect that.
Yeah,
but
of course.
At the time, my dad was a captain, so him going there was a bit more of a step up, and he was going to a staff position at first, and growing up, I'd always hear the stories about the officers getting it really bad, because there was more expected from the officers, I think, than a lot of the enlisted guys. So he would tell me about how, as an officer, they would have inspection, and they would have to go out there and be inspected as officers, and for like little strings on their PT uniform, they get smoked.
Yeah.
So that was a big thing back then. Is the officers were the best of the best that you could get in the Army.
Of course.
And a lot of people don't realize what the 80s were for the military in general. It was a very new time for the military.
Yeah, of course, turbulent.
Oh yeah. My dad joined in he joined in the late 70s when the military was really bad.
Oh yeah.
The early 80s were really bad too. So he kind of got to experience what I think a lot of people are experiencing now, with kind of the decline of some of the discipline of some of the soldiers and things like that, were things that were happening in the 70s and 80s. So he saw Ranger Regiment as a place to go to where there would be more of a where people wanted to be.
Yeah, of course.
Where they just kind of ended up. So he went there, he went through rope, and got picked up as the regimental S3 Air. So he did all the air planning operations and stuff like that for a while. And my mom was going to school in Auburn. And then he got what's called the Ranger Round. And so when a staff officer gets picked for a company command, they get what's called the Ranger Round. And it's kind of like I think it's like a 155 shell from an AC-130 or something. And it's supposed to be like, you pass it on to the guy that's going, the next guy to get a company command.
Yeah.
And so at the time, 275 was going through some issues, and the new regimental commander had this situation where he was like, okay, I'm going to start weeding out officers that don't perform. And so he started firing a bunch of people up in 275. Now, some guys, enlisted guys will tell you, enlisted guys from that time, I don't know what was really going on, and they may not know what really going on. I'm just going by what my dad told me what was going on.
Yeah, of course.
Was that there was, discipline problems that were happening in 275. And so he got picked to go up there and kind of clean shop. And that's what he did. I can tell you, having communicated with a lot of guys that were around in the 80s that served under him, a lot of them didn't like him.
yeah, of course. So
he go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're all good.
Well, so he kind of showed up there and kind of, laid down a law from the regimental headquarters. Because, again, you have to remember, regiment had just formed. We moved up there in 87, 86, somewhere around there. So regiment had just formed. It was all kind of brand new.
Yeah.
So I was born in 85, so I was kind of born when my dad was still at regimental headquarters. And then we moved up to Fort Lewis, Washington, and he took command of Alpha Company 275.
Okay.
And, the stories that I've heard growing up were all about going to Panama, going into like Guatemala and Honduras, because that was kind of what the mission was at the time, was South America.
Yeah, of course. So for all the viewers who don't know, prior to, I want to say 1984 or 1985, all the Ranger battalions, they were pretty much independent of each other. So you had a bunch of Ranger companies in Vietnam that were attached to, divisional units like 101st, 82nd. But after Vietnam, that all got condensed, and eventually those Ranger units found their way into the Ranger Battalions, and then they formed into the Ranger Regiment in about 85, 86, if I'm correct there.
Technically, it was 84, and then they officially formed as regiment in 85. So my dad has the 75th Infantry patch, the 75th Infantry scroll, which is like one of the rarest scrolls you can have.
Yeah.
Because the 75th Infantry only existed for about a year while they were forming the regiment.
Okay.
So, so the whole mission that he was involved in was South America. That was kind of his thing. At the time, you know, I was a little kid, for, you know, 3, 4, 5, around that time frame.
Okay.
So I remember some of the stuff. I remember some of it, but a lot of it I don't remember what my dad was doing. I usually just get the stories from him.
Of course.
You know, they were training to go into Panama before 89. They were doing it in like 88. They had the whole thing planned out. You know, they were at one point they were at the airfield rigging up to go and jump into Panama, and then the jump got canceled.
Okay.
So, and this was all like right before the actual Just Cause, which happened in December of 89.
Yeah.
And kind of a funny story about that is his company, Alpha Company, was going to be kind of like the main push on the barracks of the Panamanian Defense Force.
Yeah.
So that was what they were training for, and they were training constantly for that mission. And then my dad got selected to Command and General Staff College the summer of 1989. Yeah. So we moved to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, in, you know, that summer of 1989. And I remember we went to my grandparents' house for Christmas in New Jersey, and we were still there when they jumped into Panama. And I remember my dad watching TV and just thinking, oh man, like he just missed out on.
Yeah, that was his shot to go.
Yeah. And so he graduated from Command and General Staff College, and we moved to Italy after that, which at the time, it wasn't the 173rd like it is now. Back in the day, they used to rotate units from like the 82nd and the 101st to Italy to be the Southern European Task Force. So they would send like a battalion of guys.
Yeah.
And so at the time, it was 3rd of the 325, which is in the 82nd technically, but they didn't wear 82nd patches. They would wear the Southern European Task Force patch.
Oh, okay.
And so around that time, he was going to Africa a lot. They were going down to Botswana to train the Botswanian, like, border patrol.
Yeah, of course.
Something like that, like the Botswanian Defense Force.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's where he was going, like the whole time that we lived in Italy. Was they were doing that kind of mission in Africa.
Okay.
So he missed out on the Gulf War.
Yeah.
He didn't get to go to Somalia. So we came back to the States in 93, and my dad got the deputy command position of the Old Guard.
Okay.
And I guess I can go into what the Old Guard is. The Old Guard is the 3rd Infantry Regiment. It's one of the oldest regiments in the United States Army, but they are responsible for all the... so technically they're responsible for the defense of Washington, D.C., but they're also responsible for all the funerals at Arlington. So he took deputy command of the Old Guard in like 94.
Okay.
And during that time, you know, I was growing up. I grew up, lived on Fort Belvoir in Virginia. because it was the better place to live.
Yeah, of course, man.
We could have lived at Fort Myer, but we would have been going to like DC schools and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So my dad chose for us to live at Fort Belvoir,
Okay.
which was a good time. It was a really cool post, and at the time it was, very small. Not many people were there. The only people that were kind of there were like the MPs, and there were some engineers that were there.
Yeah.
But it was a very small installation, and actually, a really funny thing is, so we used to go into the woods there. My friends and I, we would go, and there was all this crazy stuff in the woods. Well, years later, come to find out that there was a lot more stuff in that woods than we knew about, because they found the prototype for like the largest tank ever built in America sitting out in the woods on Fort Belvoir. So that was always like that. When I found out about that, I was like, holy shit, like imagine what I could have found if I was out there.
Oh yeah. You went out with a metal detector, right?
Yeah. So kind of continuing on, my dad retired from the Army in 96. 96 was when he was 96, 97, somewhere around there.
Okay.
He retired from the Army and started working for like DynCorp at first.
Okay.
And like the Yugoslavia situation was going on, so they were doing a lot of like his job was kind of like a planning type of thing.
Yeah.
So he kind of had a little bit of involvement in that, and he did a couple more jobs. The FBCB2, the Blue Force tracking system, he worked on the group that kind of developed that system.
Oh, okay. All right.
He did that for a couple of years, and during that time, I was going to school. I don't want to say I was bad at school, but I wasn't good at school.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I did my own thing.
Yeah.
And so my junior year, we were kind of trying to figure out where I was going to end up going to college. And my grades were not good enough for service academy or anything like that. I went to VMI one time for like an overnight stay. So if you don't know what VMI is, it's the Virginia Military Institute. So pulled up there, and I stayed there for a night. I never went back. Like I sat there with these cadets, and they looked at me, and they're like, "Why the fuck are you here?" And I was like, "I think I want to go here." And they're like, "No, you don't."
Yeah.
And I didn't realize what they were talking about until that night. I'm sitting there laying on this cot, because you don't really have a bed there; you have a cot.
Yeah.
And I hear these keys jangling down the hallway. Well, they don't have a hallway; they have like a big open area. So I hear these keys jangling. And this dude just comes up and opens the door, and this is like 2 a.m. on like a Saturday night.
Yeah.
And he starts yelling at these cadets and starts smoking them at 2 a.m. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, why would I want to go here?
Yeah.
And so my dad came and picked me up the next day, and I jumped in the car, and I was like, I'm never going here. Fuck that. Never going to this place.
Yeah.
And so he was like, okay, well, let's go. My dad was really good friends with General Mixon, Randy Mixon. He was a friend of my dad's from the 3rd of the 325, and then he ended up becoming the 25th Infantry Division commander.
Okay.
And I think he ran CENTCOM for a while too.
Okay.
But General Mixon had gone to a college called North Georgia College, and it's this kind of smaller school in Dahlonega, Georgia, and it's known for producing really good infantry officers and things like that. So I was like, let's go give it a look.
Okay.
And so my dad and I drove down there, and we kind of walked around the campus, and it turns out that the director, like the colonel of the ROTC program was a friend of my dad's. And then the director of admissions was a JAG officer that was with my dad in the old guard.
Okay.
So the director of admissions was like, hey, just send your application. And as long as you pass high school and you have a decent GPA, we'll get you in here. And they sent me the acceptance letter like the next week. And I had already had my college figured out before I started my senior year. So I was like, fuck yeah, you know?
Of course.
So went and graduated high school, 2003. 9/11. So I guess incorporate 9/11 into that because
Yeah, of course.
I was in high school. I was in 10th grade when 9/11 happened. I went to school in Northern Virginia. I mean, we were 25 miles away from the Pentagon.
Yeah.
So my parents both got evacuated from DC. My mom actually had to stay in DC because she was a medical personnel, so she had to stay in DC till later that night. My dad had an office at the Pentagon, but he was working at another building at the time. A lot of people that I knew, like other students, had parents that were at the Pentagon, and so it really kind of affected me a lot. I'd always knew I wanted to be in the military, but that really kind of like upped the ante a little bit more.
Absolutely.
Kind of made me want to join up quite a bit more. And so Iraq happened in 2003, right before I graduated. And I was like, oh yeah, I got to get into this. You know, I want to be in the military. There's a war. This is it. This is what you want to do. This is what everyone wants to do, you know, is go to war.
Absolutely.
And, so I, let's see, graduated high school 2003. I went to North Georgia College. They have this thing where it's like a orientation for new cadets. It's called Frog Week. And like when you show up there, you're a frog.
Yeah.
And as a freshman, and it was, for someone that had never done anything like that, it was kind of difficult, you know, because you're getting yelled at. And I mean, I had my dad yell at me most of the time when I was a kid, so like yelling at me wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I ended up getting food poisoning about midweek, and I was puking and pooping all over myself. It was horrible.
Yeah.
But I still completed the week. They had thoughts about dropping me in terms of like making me redo Frog Week for the spring semester. But I ended up completing that event. I missed the helicopter ride, so I didn't ride in the helicopter, which is kind of disappointing. But I finished all the physical events to kind of finish that portion of the thing. So I was a cadet for, you know, 2 years, 2.5, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to my junior year of college. I got in trouble for drinking.
Of course, as you do.
Yeah, it was kind of a stupid situation too. Like someone had bought some 40s and we were drinking 40s in the barracks, as you do when you're, 19, 20 years old.
Absolutely.
And someone was stupid enough to throw them out in the trash can, like in the stairwell.
Yeah.
And so someone went to go throw the trash away and they heard like the bottle in there.
Yeah.
So they got found and they lined everyone up and they're like, whose is it? And I was like, it was mine. I'm not going to sit here and lie about it or screw someone else over or anything like that. It was mine. And then, 2 of the other guys that were involved, they admitted it too. And I got in trouble. I had to do like walking tours, which is when you like have to like put on a helmet liner that's all like silver and walk around with a gun in front of the memorial. You have to like do a certain amount of steps. So I did that. I was kind of like, I really don't want to be in college anymore. Like, this kind of sucks. I was worried that stupidly, it was 2005, and I was like, man, this war is going to end before I can get over there.
Yeah.
You know, because that was my main fear, was that everything was going to be over before I got a chance to go over and do anything. Because, you know, the pipeline for an officer, and then they started talking about commissioning, and they're like, well, your GPA is this, so you can get chemical corps or you can get transportation corps. And I was like, fuck no. Like, I didn't join the Army to be a logistics guy.
Yeah, of course.
And so at the time, the 18 X-ray program was like brand new. And I called my dad and I was like, hey, you know, I want to join the Army. And I saw this 18 X-ray program and I'm really interested in possibly doing that. And he was like, hey, like, don't go and try to enlist right now. Come home and we're going to talk about this when you get home. And so we got home and I was like super intent on doing the 18 X-ray program. And he was like, listen, doesn't matter if that's what you want to do. To be 100% honest, if you do it and you don't get selected, you are needs of the Army.
Yeah.
They will send you wherever they want to send you and whatever job they want you to do. And he was like, it doesn't matter how physically strong you are. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It matters how they feel that day if they select you. He was like, if you went to Ranger Regiment, you'd be able to do exactly what you want, which is carry a machine gun and shoot bad guys. And all you have to do is make it through the selection process. And the selection process is literally just you doing your job and being the best you can be. And if you fail at it, you fail at it. But you can't sit there and think, you know, look back on and say you didn't try.
Yeah.
And so I went to the recruiter, and my recruiter was like an 82nd Airborne, like laundry guy or something. And he was like, well, I don't know if we can get you a option 40 contract, but we'll try. And my dad was like, if he doesn't get an option 40 contract, he's not going to sign.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, well, okay. And so they started putting me in to, you know, do the option 40. And I went through the whole process of enlisting. And to be honest, most of that time, because I left college in December and I didn't ship out until the end of March. So most of that time I spent just drinking alcohol excessively with my friends. Like, I was a very bad person during that time in terms of drinking and waking up at like 3 p.m. and then doing it all over again.
Yeah.
So needless to say, I was not in the best shape of my life at any point in time going into the Army.
Absolutely.
So kind of a little tidbit for people out there, you know, that have this idea that they need to be like Superman before they even join. It all depends on what you do when you get there. So I was really out of shape. They did a little PT test for your private first class rank that you could do with the recruiters, and I failed to run. I failed it horribly, but they're like, yeah, you're good. We'll just put you on there to get your PFC because you have college.
Yeah.
So I ended up going to MEPS. When I got to MEPS, I sat down in the office and the guy was like, all right, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to go Ranger. I want option 40. And he was like, oh, we don't got no option 40s, man. Like, I can give you this Cab Scout. It's just like a Ranger. And I was like, I told him, I was like, no, I want an option 40 or I'm going to get up and walk out. And he was like, all right, I can get you an airborne infantry. And I was like, no, I want option 40 or I'm going to walk out.
Yeah.
And he was like, let me make a phone call real quick. And he got on the phone, and I swear I can hear the dial tone in the background, like, you know, like the, if you'd like to make a call, please hang up and try it. I can hear that. Yeah. He's on there, and he's like, yeah, this guy wants option 40. All right, yeah, we'll work it. All right, I got you an option 40. You leave on March 31st. And I was like, March 31st is my birthday. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's also my 21st birthday. But I was like, I'll take it. Give me it. Give me that shit. And so I got my option 40, and I remember the funny thing is I'd gone with this other kid from my recruiting station, and he was trying to be a Marine reservist. He
Yeah.
was going to go be an Amtrak driver in the Marine Reserves. And I get down there and I sit down, and I'm all happy, and I look over at him, and he's got this like sad look on his face. And I was like, "What happened, dude? Like, you not get your Amtrak driver slot?" He's like, "I got infantry, and I leave next week." And I was like, "But didn't you want to be an Amtrak driver in the reserves?" He's like, "Yeah, but they started talking to me, and they're like, this is the best way to go, and this is what you're doing." And so I signed. And I was like, "You got fucked, bro," because this is 2005. So at the time, 2005 in Iraq was like fucking hell on earth.
Yeah.
So more than likely, this dude ended up shipping out within that first year to Iraq, and who knows what happened to him.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But so I got my shit, and it was like a month until I shipped out, and I didn't prepare at all. I just drank.
Yeah.
I had no desire to do anything physical to get ready. I didn't think about it at the time.
Yeah, of course.
And so,
I'm sorry. Just before you continue, for all the listeners that don't know, option 40 and 18 X-ray are different forms of enlisting into the Army. So your 18 X-ray is Special Forces selection, and basically what that does is if you enlist with a 18 X-ray contract, you will be guaranteed a slot at SFAS, which is Special Forces Assessment and Selection. And then as for your option 40, that is guaranteeing that you'll go to Ranger Assessment and Selection program after your OSUT or your AIT. Just to make that clear for all the listeners.
Yep. And at the time, back in that day, it all was dependent on your completion of everything else. You had, because back then we did Airborne School before RIP.
Yeah.
So you had to complete Airborne School to get to RIP. So I'll kind of get into a little bit that as we go on. So basic training. So let's see. I reported into Fort Benning. We flew out that morning out of the DC area, and there was some kid with me, and he was all pumped up about being a Ranger because he had gotten an option 40 somehow. He was all pumped up, like talking about how awesome it was, and he was just being a dick the whole plane ride down to Atlanta. And we get to Atlanta, and he's being all pumped up as we're waiting for the drill sergeants, and we get on the bus, and we start busing from Atlanta to Fort Benning. I just remember him talking all this shit the whole way down. And then I remember passing through the front gate of Sand Hill, and it has Fort Benning, home of the infantry. And I hear on the bus, it's dark, I hear, this motherfucker was crying, bawling his eyes out as we entered Fort Benning. I was like, this motherfucker was talking so much shit on the way down here, and he's crying. We haven't even gotten yelled at once yet.
Yeah.
and then we get there, and it's the standard 30th AG. Anyone that's ever gone to Sand Hill knows 30th AG.
Oh yeah.
It's like, and there's this midget drill sergeant there, and he's just like yelling up, talking about all these kids killing themselves and shit like that. And we're like, dude, what the fuck? Like, this is crazy. And like, dudes are crying, dudes are quitting, like on the spot and all this other shit. And I remember it was March 31st, so it was my birthday. And I'm going in, I'm filling all this paperwork out. And they're like, no, we need today's date, we need your birthday, not today's date. And I was like, today is my birthday.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? And then they're like, no, we need your birth location, not where you are now. And I'm like, I was born like 5 miles down the road.
Yeah.
Like, oh shit. Like, I'm like, yeah, I'm here on my 21st birthday. So yeah.
Right down the road,
Yeah. And so, first couple weeks of basic training, a lot of guys quit. A lot of guys can't hack it, especially back then. Like I said, I don't know what basic training is now. I know they've modified a whole bunch of stuff, but back then it was literally just like assholes. Like we're just gonna treat you like shit.
Oh yeah.
There was no kind of like, there was only one drill sergeant I ever had that really mentored me. Everyone else just kind of treated you like shit.
Oh yeah.
So I had this one drill sergeant. He was like Puerto Rican. He was a National Guard SF guy that got stuck on drill sergeant duty. But he was cool as hell. He was all about helping us out, teaching us the cool stuff, and we did a lot of good stuff. And at the time I came in there, I was really out of shape, and I just remember the first PT test we did. I remember puking and being like, okay, like I need to do this every day. Like I need to puke. I need to show that I'm putting in as much effort as I can,
of course,
to get better. And so one thing I tell people when they're going in, ability groups, don't sell yourself short on ability groups.
Put
yourself, whatever you think you can do, put yourself in the group ahead of that, because you may suck for the first couple weeks, but you're going to get better. And so I would put myself in the ability group above what I had, and I would just run as hard as I could until I puked, until I passed out. I mean, whatever it took, I did to get better. And so at one point, I got what's it called? The fucking shit that looks like a pimple at first, and then it ends up pussing under the skin. Cellulitis.
Oh, okay.
I got cellulitis in my knee, and I got it really bad, to the point where, like, I couldn't bend my knee. And so the drill sergeant that was in SF, he was like, "Hey, come with me real quick." And we went to the bathroom, and he gave me a bottle of hand sanitizer, and he took a razor and he cut it open, and all this pus just into the sink.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Every day, just pour this hand sanitizer on there, and don't tell anyone that you got this shit. Just pour the hand sanitizer on there and clear it out every day." And it solved the problem. He kept me in there. He kept me in the game because I was not having a good time. And so one of the other things I did to kind of help my running out, and I kind of had to do it, because I'm the type of person that if I start sweating, I don't stop unless I cool off.
Oh yeah.
So every morning after PT, they'd kind of be like, release run back to the barracks, and you got 15 minutes to be down ready for chow. Like some dudes would just walk, and so they could get there and then put on ACEs and go downstairs. I would sprint every morning because I knew I had to get into the shower and turn on the cold water and douse myself, because Fort Benning in the middle of summer is horrible.
Oh yeah.
So I would just douse myself in water and put on ACEs. And at the time we had like the brand new ACEs too. We were like one of the first classes to get ACEs, and so the crotch would just tear out on all of them.
Oh yeah.
Like no one had a whole crotch like the entirety of basic training. Everyone just blew their crotches out.
Yeah.
And so I ended up getting was it strep or I think I got strep throat in basic as well, and that knocked me out for about 3 or 4 days. And I had to go to the infirmary and shit like that. I don't remember much of it because I was like in and out of consciousness for like 3 days.
Yeah.
But I was able to get back and do the rifle range and then kind of finish up basic training, which was good. I graduated basic training. I was in Bravo 150.
Okay.
So I was able to finish that up, and then got into Airborne Hold. Because at the time, I don't know how much Airborne Hold still runs Airborne Hold, but we had airborne hold. And so there's these trailers down by where they had the javelin course and by that, I think it was by the PX or something like that on Sand Hill.
Oh, okay.
And you had to go there and wait for an airborne school to open up. And we kind of got screwed because we graduated in the summer. And so in the summer, all these cadets come through, and the cadets have priority over enlisted.
Yeah.
Because cadets can only go in the summertime. So they push these cadets through. So a lot of the enlisted guys get kind of screwed. So in airborne hold, you pretty much just do details. Like I think we were painting rocks somewhere, some bullshit like that. And dudes, that's when dudes would go out because you could leave on the weekends and stuff. So dudes would go out and buy like Xboxes and like all this other shit with all their money.
Yeah.
And so while we were at airborne hold, we were getting ready to go over to airborne school, and they kind of brought everyone out there, and they said, "Hey, option 40 guys, come over here." And so all of us, and there were a decent amount of us. There was probably 40 option 40 guys. They brought us over there, and they said, "Hey, if you guys drop your option 40, you can get duty station of choice." And
That's a good
probably, oh yeah, probably 90% of the dudes dropped.
Yeah.
And they were all like, Italy, Italy, Italy. I want to go to Italy. And me and about 5 other dudes kind of stuck with it. We're like, we'll go to RIP. We'd rather do that.
Yeah.
And so we all got sent over, and we did Alpha Company 506, I think, or 50, whatever the airborne schools. I can't remember what they are. But we went over there, and we did the PT test the first day, and I got 41 clubbed. So you need 42 to pass, and you do push-up for the push-ups and get to 41, and you do push-up, and they're like 41. You do more push-ups, and they're like 41.
Yeah.
And then the time's up, and they're like, all right, retest. 5 minutes later, you have to do it again. You get to 41, and they're like 41, 41. And you're like, what the fuck? And so probably about half of my infantry guys, like us enlisted guys, about half of us got recycled.
Okay.
And so they sent us into the next class, which was starting in like another week. At that point, I was probably the lowest I'd been. And so I called my dad, and I was like, hey, I think I'm going to drop all this and just go to like 3rd ID and try to be like a scout or something over in 3rd ID. And he was like, don't do that shit. He's like, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And that was kind of the motto I lived by as a kid growing up with my dad. And he was like, any time that you see what those guys do and you see what you're doing at 3rd ID, you're going to regret dropping airborne school. It's easy. Just go out there and do what you have to do, and you'll be fine. And I was like, okay. So like that week was details, like shoot, shake out, detail over and over again. But then the next PT test rolled around, and I fucking dominated that shit. I made sure that there was no way they could do the 41 club. Because once I got the 42, I was like, all right, I'm done.
Yeah.
Got up. I was like, I'm not going to sit here and do like 86 push-ups for you.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter. Once I passed, I passed.
Oh, yeah.
And so did airborne school. And it was really interesting because I actually ran into people that I had gone to college with that were in airborne school as officers. So I ran into a bunch of them. I ran into a girl that was from my Northern Virginia. She was friends with one of my buddy's sisters.
Okay.
And so she was a cadet at TCU, and we had a good time. I mean, like airborne school is fun. It's a fun time. It can be challenging at times, but majority of the time it's just fairly easy.
Of course.
And we were jumping with the old T10s, and My first jump was out of a C-130. And then my first night jump was out of a C-17. And if you never jumped out of a C-17 and it's your first time ever doing it, it's scary as hell.
Oh yeah, I bet.
It like sucks you out of the door. So Airborne School was fun. It was a good time. It was fairly easy to do. Jumping is not easy because no one wants to. You don't think about it until afterwards. I'll just put it like that. Yeah. While you're doing it, there's so much adrenaline going. You'll just go and be like, wow, you don't care that much. But then you start thinking about it afterwards. You're like, oh, what if this went wrong? Oh shit.
Yeah.
So Airborne School finished, and then they came down and so the morning of graduation, we finished up, and then they came down from RIP, and they're like, all you guys going to RIP, get the fuck over here. We all ran over there with all of our bags, and they're like, put all your bags in the fucking truck, and we threw all the bags in the truck, and like, get in formation. We fucking lined up, and then we fucking ran down to RIP.
Okay.
And then, because RIP was right down the street, it's probably a mile, if that. Yeah. But we got down there, and then they dumped all of our shit, dumped everything in big piles too. That was the worst part. Just dumped it all in a big pile.
Oh yeah.
And they were like looking for shit. So I had like a PSP, little PlayStation portable thing.
Yeah.
And they took all of your electronics and stuff. You get to keep your phone, but they took all of your other electronics and they put it in a sandbag, and the sandbag went in the basement. I never saw it again. Mainly because I completely forgot about it, and also I was afraid to ask about it.
Oh yeah.
You don't realize later on you're like, oh, that's no problem. I would just ask about it. But at the time, man, these dudes were not the type of people that you felt like you could approach.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So the first day we get there, this was in September. So it was August, I think. Yeah, August.
What year was it?
2006.
Okay.
So at the very end of 2006, of August of 2006, and I got into RIP Hold, and that's where you do. I think they have RASP Hold now, but it used to be RIP Hold, and RIP Hold was like torture session ×5.
Oh yeah, just getting fucked up.
Yeah, you're getting smoked. You do your PT test to get in. I actually still have my PT card from my PT test to get into RIP. And you do the PT test. That's where we lost the majority of our guys with the PT test to get into RIP. And if you fail the PT test, you're kicked out of RIP Hold. If you don't pass with the 80%, then they recycle you, or they tell you can leave. Most guys ended up leaving. And so during that week, it was a lot of smokings. And then you get called up on details for 3rd Bat usually. 3rd Bat would come over there and be like, hey, we need guys to go do this. They stopped using Rippies as Op 4 when some Rippies got beat up. So they stopped using them.
Yeah.
They used to use Rippies for Op 4 for airfield seizure and stuff, but eventually it got a little bit too intense for Rippies to handle. And then the other battalions were complaining about it.
Yeah.
Because 3rd Bat had access to all the Rippies.
And they just didn't get anything else, at 1 and 2.
Yeah. Yeah. So 275 didn't have any Rippies to get a hold of. So
yeah.
And so during that time, they were getting ready to clear out the old barracks, the old 375 barracks, the ones that you see now, that the tan buildings.
Okay.
I think they have a couple. I think they may still have some companies in there, but we were clearing those out. Those were the old barracks for when 3rd Battalion first moved over to that area. Those were the original barracks. So we were going through and taking furniture out and tiles out and stuff. and we would find like porno mags and stuff like that in the ceilings. And like beer bottles like shoved in the back and stuff.
Yeah, of course.
And so we did that for like a week. But what was funny during that time was the formations they would call, and they would just be like, all right, who wants to quit? And you'd get like 5 people would raise their hand, and they'd be like, no, that's not how you fucking do it. It's like, come all the way up here to the front, turn around to everyone, and say, I fucking quit. And these dudes would run up there, and they'd be like, I quit. And they'd be like, okay. And you get guys that are like, my buddy quit, so I'm going to quit too. I'm like, You're fucking losers, man. So that like first week of rip hold, sucked. I was lucky. I only had to do a week. There are sometimes people would spend weeks and weeks, months even at rip hold.
Yeah.
It's just depending on what their situation. One guy got hurt, and he ended up spending like 6 months in rip hold. He became kind of like he ended up graduating with my class, but for a while there, he was kind of like their admin guy. Like he would follow around the rip instructors and like grade stuff, things like that. And so we finished that week, and then Labor Day was coming up. So they're like, hey, you guys have a 3-day, and like you report on Friday to RIP. Like you go over to the next building. Which is funny because Sergeant Major Nolan at the time, he was the first sergeant of the Ranger Operations Company at the time.
Okay.
And that was what ran RIP was the ROC, the Ranger Operations Company. And he was the first sergeant of that company.
Okay.
And he came by to do a barracks inspection. And this is when I was still in RIP hold. Like it was like Thursday, and I was going to RIP the next day. And my greens, my Army greens, like my dress uniform was like smashed in the bottom of my locker.
Yeah.
And he saw that, and he was furious. And he was like, you're going to fucking get that shit dry cleaned, and you're going to see me tomorrow, and you're going to have it all fucking set up. And I was like, First Sergeant, I'm going to RIP tomorrow. And he was like, oh, well, fuck, I'm watching you, and shit like that. And I was like, oh, And if you know who First Sergeant Nolan is, he's one of the like scariest looking people in Ranger Battalion. Like, he's a scary looking motherfucker, and he's a scary person. He was a sergeant major at 3rd Bat for a while, but he chewed me out pretty good that day, and that kind of like scared the shit out of me. So that Friday we reported over to RIP, and then we had a 3-day weekend because of Labor Day.
Okay.
And they were like, you have to report back. You report back at the time that you're supposed to on that like Monday night, and then get ready to fucking go. So we reported back that night. Some dudes were late to formation. They got dropped. Like they showed up like 2 minutes too late, and they're like, all right, you're done. You're gone. So it was kind of like one of those things where you better show up on fucking time or you're going to get dropped.
Yeah, 15 minutes prior,
Oh, yeah, 15 minutes prior to 15 minutes prior. That's how it works.
Yeah.
So, but, and so we started RIP that next morning, and that was a doozy.
Oh, yeah. So, take us through a little bit of, what RIP is like. Because there's a lot of people who I personally know that they're enlisting into the Army to become a Ranger. So I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about Ranger Regiment, but also particularly like selection in general. So if you could take us through really fast, like what was the day-to-day life? Did you ever want to quit during that process? Because that's like a tough thing to go through.
So I went through RIP. Okay. Back in the old day, we didn't have RASP. We had a 3-week course that was RIP. And RIP was designed to test your capability to put up with the bullshit and not quit. From what I've heard from everyone that's gone through RASP is more of a to see who you are as a person and to train you. They already know that you're capable of the physicality portion. They're more looking to see that you are capable of being a ranger, being taught to be a ranger. Back in the RIP days, it was, we don't care if you're physically stronger than everyone else. We don't care if you're a better leader. We don't care if you're smart. We don't care about any of this shit. We care about if you're going to quit. Because that's what it was about. They could train anyone that needed to be trained, but you got to be able to put up with it.
Of course.
And so, like, literally the first day, we went, and at the time it was Sergeant First Class Poliot, who I think he's a Sergeant Major. Where was he Sergeant Major at? I mean, he became my first sergeant in 375 at one point, and then he's a division Sergeant Major somewhere, I think, right now.
Okay.
He was probably the scariest person I've ever met in Ranger Battalion in terms of just totally, like, you didn't even know how to talk to him because you were so afraid to talk to him.
And I mean, that's definitely hard to beat, in some of those units. You definitely see like these really stoic guys who are almost like legendary. And like when you meet them, you're just like wow, like how could I even compare to this dude?
Well, and he was all about testing your mental fortitude. That was his thing. When we were out doing runs, it'd be like, do you want to quit? Are you going to quit? Are you a fucking quitter? And you get guys that would be like, yes. And they would fall out of runs and they would quit, go off to the side. For example, like the first day we're there, I got the bright idea. I'm going to be road guard because I'm going to show them that I'm like super into this and I can run really well. And I want to be the fucking front guy. So I'm road guard and I'm fucking sprinting up to the road and I put my my fucking flashlight out there and I got my arm out and everything and I'm waiting for the guy from the back that's supposed to relieve me. And that motherfucker's nowhere to be seen. And I'm like, you got to be shitting me. Finally, after the whole formation pass, he comes running up and I'm like, dude, you got to fucking relieve me like halfway. So I got to sprint all the way back up to the front. And we run over to what's called the slave pit on Fort Benning. Now, later in life, I found out it's got nothing to do with slavery at all. But we all called it the slave pit. It's this little kind of like arena in the middle of the woods. It's all overgrown. It's from the early 1900s. It was actually a horse where they would do like parade horses. And they would do like the horses do like the high step and shit. They would go down there and do that down there in like the 20s. But we all thought it was like where they would display slaves to kind of add to the misery of the place. And so we get down there and they start smoking the shit out of us, like up downs, mountain climbers, monkey fuckers. You're doing everything. You're just getting smoked. And they're like, we're not going to stop smoking you until 10 guys quit. And I'm sitting there doing this shit and I'm looking around like, who's going to fucking quit? You got the one guy who's like, eyes are closed and his mouth's open. And he's like drooling on himself. I'm like, that dude's going to quit. And you got all these, and I never understood these dudes. They're like, don't quit. Don't give him the satisfaction. I'm like, shut the fuck up. Let this dude quit. Let him quit. Let's get 10 quitters. Come on, 10 quitters, go. And we got 10 quitters. We got it fairly quickly, actually. And then like 10 dudes quit first day. And then once we got the 10 dudes, we went and did the Downing Mile. And the Downing Mile is like a obstacle course. It's a lot better now. They've kind of rebuilt it. There was a time it was practically abandoned, all overgrown and shit. And you're like running through the woods, falling all over the place, getting yelled at the whole time.
And don't even know where you are.
Yeah, and it pops out at the bottom of Cardiac Hill. For anyone that doesn't know what Cardiac Hill is, it's a hill over there by Lawson Airfield. and it's almost like vertical. It's a shitty hill, and we had a buddy carry up and down Cardiac.
Yeah.
Just up and down Cardiac. A couple more guys quit, as we're doing that. I think we had like 10, 15 dudes quit in the first day just from that first event. And just because, physically you can make it, but it's all mental. Because if you're there in RIP or in RASP, I guess now, you physically can do the job. There's no question about you being able to physically do it. It's just a matter of you mentally being able to, because I saw dudes that were in great shape quit.
Yeah.
It didn't matter how great of shape you were at that point, you would quit if you didn't have the mental fortitude for it. And so, we suffered through that first day, and then, PT was difficult. I will say that it was never easy. You never had an easy day.
Yeah, of course.
You do the ruck marches. We'd lose a lot of guys during ruck marches. They'd get like twisted ankles or something like that. Some guys would quit during the ruck march, like they wouldn't be able to make it. If you got hurt, you recycle.
Yeah.
If you quit, you quit. So I think the second week we headed out to the Coal Range.
Okay.
Coal Range, for anyone that doesn't know, is kind of like the training area for RIP. And they also it's also pretty much the training area for Ranger Battalion, like 3rd Bat.
Okay.
And it's got a land nav course and a little area to do like the rope stuff. And at the time, it only had like a little cabin out there. I think they've got a little bit more stuff out there, but it only had like a little cabin that had like a fenced-in area. And then they're like, all right, pull out these tents. So we had like GP mediums, like those big green tents.
Yeah.
And we're like, set that shit up. And we ran out there, and everyone's running around like chickens with their head cut off, trying to set up this stupid tent. And we get it set up, and we're like, all right, we're going to sleep in there. Nope. No one touched the tent. We just built it for no reason.
Yeah.
And one of the funniest things happened is we're all sitting out there, and they're like, everyone get in formation. We all kind of got in formation. We all had our rucks on because you ruck out there. That's like the first ruck you do, and it's like the 5 mile or 8 miler or something like that.
Mm.
And everyone put the rucks down, and they're like, all right, go to sleep. And we're like, what the fuck? Go to sleep. What?
Yeah, you never hear that one in RASP, right?
Yeah, and they let us sleep for like an hour or two. I guess because they realized everyone was fucking exhausted.
Yeah.
And then we woke up, and then we got smoked. It all kind of depended on who the instructor was at the time. We had Sergeant Edwards was one of my RIP instructors, so he was the RRD guy that you see in all like the videos and stuff.
Oh, Mike Edwards.
Yeah, he was he was RIP cadre for me.
Okay.
And he was one of those dudes that would be like, all right, go to the tree line, grab me a stick. So the tree line was pretty far away. I mean, it was like probably like 100, maybe 200 meters away, and you had to like run sprinting down there and grab a stick and bring a stick back to him. And he kind of determined who brought the best stick back. So dudes were like grabbing logs and like running back with logs, trying to get the best stick. But you do that shit over and over again, and hit the wood line. Anyone that's ever been to Coal Range knows about hitting the wood line.
Oh yeah.
So we're out there at Coal Range. We kind of get smoked for like the first day, and then the next day we do land nav, and we kind of start land nav early in the morning because we do night land nav first, and then we did day and then we did night.
Okay.
Because I remember we did the day land nav alone. You do day land nav alone, and then you do night land nav with a buddy, and then I think you do a night land nav by yourself. I'm pretty sure you do one by yourself.
All right.
Because we had a cook with us who was tabbed from the 82nd, And I think he thought he could just go and not do the land nav and be fine. And he got caught sleeping out there. And they fucking brought him in front of everyone. And one of the instructors took his Ranger tab off this cook's PC and like ripped the Ranger tab off.
Yeah.
And threw it on the ground. Was like, "You're fucking done," and kicked him out of, send him home, send him packing right there.
Fuck.
What's funny is they needed cooks, so eventually he came back, and they
Okay.
ended up seeing him at the chow hall like a year later. And I was
All
like,
right,
dude,
so it's not all too bad,
No, I mean, like if you're a soft skill, they're gonna try to keep you more than they will like the 11 Bravos or like the 13 Fox.
Yeah.
If you're 11 Bravo or 13 Fox, you're fucked. Like,
Yeah, because they're just there's like a lot that fall on that percentage, so they're trying to skim the horde,
Yeah, and the soft skill guys, they're gonna be like, all right, yeah, you can stick around. We need, whoever we need.
Yeah.
So, RIP was exciting, difficult. When you got your beret, it was kind of like a big deal. You really kind of felt. And then they would give you, we would be in the classroom and they'd be like, all right, put out your wish list of where you want to go, and just know you're not going to get it, is what they would say to us.
Yeah.
So a bunch of dudes put on, that were from the West Coast wanted to go to 275, so they put 275 on there. I was like, I'm right here. Fuck it. I'm just going to go to 375. Like, I don't feel like trying to drive all over the place or, anything like that. I'm here. I can just walk across the street. So I got 375. A bunch of guys got 175, and we had probably about 10 or 15 that got 275.
Okay.
So it was the Thursday. We were supposed to graduate on Friday, and we're out there doing fast roping because you have to do the fast rope qual. And we were sitting out there, and they called all the 275 guys over, and they're like, "Hey, you guys aren't going to 275 anymore." And they're like, "You guys are either going to 375 or you're going to regimental headquarters."
Okay.
And so at the time they were forming that Special Troops Battalion. They were kind of getting the core members of the Special Troops Battalion, which in the end kind of worked out better for a lot of those guys because a lot of them ended up going to like interrogator school and, some of those technical surveillance classes and things like that. So
so they got like opportunities that weren't open to the regular Ranger.
Yeah, and so they kind of lucked out in that sense. We actually had a guy break his leg the morning of graduation doing PT, which was pretty shitty. So he had to show up to, I think he went the first bat. He had to show up down there with a cast on his leg. Because we were doing PT on the field and his foot got stuck in a hole, like a gopher hole.
Yeah.
And fell over. And so I reported to third bat. And the way it worked is if you're going to third bat, grab all your shit, going across the street. And we walk down to the chow hall, and we all go to the chow hall, and we all sit there. And then the first sergeants from each company come down and start picking dudes out. And that's scary as hell, sitting there when these first sergeants come down, because they're like fucking, you have some of the meaner dudes out there.
Oh, yeah.
They're first sergeants, big dudes ready to go.
Yeah.
And they're picking people, and, grabbing guys by the collar and like lifting them up and pulling them out, type of stuff. Yelling at them, "Get the fuck up to my company," and all this other shit. And so me and about 4 or 5 other guys, we were left.
Yeah.
And ACO, Alpha Company, was out at a range that day, so no one was there to come pick Alpha Company guys. So they're like, "Hey, you guys are Alpha Company, so go on up there." So we went all up to Alpha Company, and the only people there were the training room guys. And Oh no. The only people that were up there were there were two platoons. There was a second platoon and third platoon were up there because my platoon, first platoon, was out at the range.
Okay.
And the first sergeant and CO were out with the company at the range with the platoon. So we get up there and we kind of sit in the training room, and then the platoon sergeants from the other platoon start coming in there and like eyeing people, yelling at people. There were a couple squad leaders from second platoon that were there. And they were yelling at people, like tearing people apart.
Oh yeah.
And eventually it became me and this kid Chung. It was just the two of us. We didn't know what the fuck to do. There's like everyone else kind of got dragged out of the room, and there was just me and him sitting there. And we're like, okay. And so the day's on and on and on, and gets to be about like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 5:30 in the afternoon. And the training room guy looks in and he's like, "What the fuck are you guys still doing here?"
Yeah.
And we're like, I don't know. And he's like, "You guys are going to first platoon. Like, get the fuck out of here. Come back tomorrow." And we're like, no one told us to leave, but okay.
All right.
So we went back to the barracks rooms that we got. And the next morning we showed up and did PT with the training room. And then the platoon sergeant came in. Platoon sergeant's still in the Army right now. He's one of he was my first platoon sergeant in Ranger Regiment, and he was a great platoon sergeant. He's a command sergeant major in he was the former command sergeant major of the 173rd. But he came down there and he got me and this kid Chung, and he was like, "You're in first platoon now." And he gave us to our squads, and I went to the first platoon weapons squad, and that shit sucked.
I bet.
As a new guy, your life is fucking horrible. I mean, if I'm honest, it's not easy you can't just go in there and expect that you're going to get, number one, any respect. You're not going to get any. No one gives a shit if you passed RIP or RASP or whatever. No one cares.
No.
No one cares about anything you did. You could be honor grad. They don't give a fuck. You did the same thing they did. So congratulations. Now they're going to yell at you, or now they're going to make you push. You kind of had to earn your seat at the table, especially in those platoons at that time. When I got there, it was 2006. My squad leader had been in prior to 9/11. He had a combat star on his jump wings. He had a silver star. Pretty much every squad leader in the platoon had a silver star.
God damn.
Yeah, it was loaded. All the squad leaders had done jumps into Afghanistan at least.
Yeah.
All the team leaders were Bronze Star guys, or at least had ARCOMs with Vs. They were all very, very experienced dudes when you showed up there. So it was really hard to kind of like come in there and think you're anything but a piece of shit. And I'll admit, man, when I first got there, I was intimidated. I was I would say it took me a while to catch on to the job.
Yeah, of course.
I think RASP now kind of prepares guys a lot more to go in there and be ready for it. RIP just kind of taught you not to quit. You go in there and you get tortured because you didn't know something, or you didn't know how something worked, or you weren't very good at something, but you wouldn't quit. So you just let it, go with it and let it happen. And, I was definitely not anything special. I will fully admit that. I struggled mightily in my first platoon. It was this kind of a thing, it was very hard to kind of settle in with the cool kids, I guess.
Yeah.
And, as time went on, we got more new guys. So you kind of elevate from being the shittiest new guy to kind of being like a little bit above the shittiest new guy.
Yeah.
and then you kind of work your way up. So we did a lot of training events. I got there in would have been October, November. I think it was October. Was when I showed up into Alpha Company, 1st Platoon, 3rd Ranger Battalion.
Yeah.
We did a training event. We went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and we did some live fire events. It was cold as fuck, raining on us the whole time. I was the brand new guy, so like I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I was getting smoked and yelled at constantly.
Yeah.
It was very kind of hard to kind of like do the job well as a new guy.
Yeah, because you're so like it's a completely different environment from like just the normal Army and regular, but just coming out of that from basic training, OSUT.
Absolutely, and then like using nods really for kind of like the first time. It's also raining, so you have iPro that's just fogging up the whole time. You don't know any of kind of like the tips and tricks to get through it. And that group in Alpha Company, it was very like they were very tight knit, very experienced, and they didn't really like want to take the time to teach. It was kind of like, get here, you better fucking catch on. Like you better catch on quick, because if you don't, we're gonna fucking be on you.
Of course.
And I mean, I'll admit I was a fuck up. As a brand new guy, some guys can go in there and be great at it, and some guys have trouble with it. And I fucked up a lot.
Yeah.
I was new, so did that first training event, Fort Campbell. Kind of got crash course into everything weapons squad at that point. The squad I came into was really good. They were really experienced. They knew what they were doing. Like I said, most of the guys that were in my squad, the team leaders and the senior spec fours and stuff, had done at least 2 deployments. I think a couple of them did 1, but the team leaders for sure. Like one of my team leaders had been in recce as a private.
Yeah.
And he had done some recce deployments and stuff like that. So, you show up, you gotta, you put up with the stuff, you get tortured sometimes. We did the first deployment, and that was to Iraq.
But before we get into your deployments, just to backtrack a little bit. So, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of people that I personally know, and just in general who are, interested in Ranger Regiment. So how does it feel? I know that you mentioned that, back in the day it was a little bit different because RIP was, just a smoke fest for 3-4 weeks, and then you just show up to the unit, right? So how does that feel to make the transition from, basic training then to RIP or RASP, and then getting to that unit? Like, how does it feel, being a brand new guy? A lot of your teammates, they just got off deployment because at this time, the regiment, they had some guys killed in Afghanistan and Iraq. So how did it feel, coming into that brand new environment as a new guy, and then everyone around you is just, they're switched on. They've already been deployed and seen heavy combat.
So when I showed up, it was the platoon I had just got back to. They had 2 guys that were seriously wounded. One in the deployment that they just were on, and then one in the deployment right before that. Sergeant Kapcheski, the one that had the leg injury that he ended up having his lower leg taken off. He was in that platoon. And then the other guy that he had gotten shot in the leg, and it had done some serious damage to his leg, and he was in the process of getting out of the Army at the time, so he would show up at work and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, when you showing up at that time was very difficult for a new guy, just because everyone there had more experience, and it was really humbling to get there and be like, oh shit, like I'm nothing. I finished RIP. Who gives a shit? Like you don't feel like you've accomplished anything at that point.
Yeah.
Like you'll graduate RIP, you'll put your beret on, and then you show up to your first platoon, and there's an image, a meme that used to go around before memes really became big.
Yeah.
And it's a chicken running away from a tiger, and it's like, congratulations on graduating from RIP. Now fucking run. You know.
Yeah.
Because that's what it was. You know, it was getting thrown to the wolves pretty quick.
Yeah.
And one of the guys that graduated RIP with me, and he went to, I think, our third platoon. He quit. He quit within the first week.
Damn.
They threw him in the mailroom because he went to the platoon sergeant the first day, like the first week, and was like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And they sent him down in the mailroom, and then eventually kicked him out. So, you know, I showed up there, and like I said, everyone that was in that unit, in that platoon, was squared away. I mean, they were ready to go. They had definitely seen a lot of action and seen a lot of stuff that I hadn't seen before. And so when it came, the only thing I can say is that when it came to deployment time, I felt more confident, knowing that everyone that was in that platoon was experienced, and there was never any doubt about their capabilities when we deployed. There's more of a doubt on myself. And I'll kind of get into that when we get to the deployment phase of things. Just because, you know, you never know how you're going to be when you first deploy. Like, it doesn't really fit. It doesn't really come into your head because you don't really process it, you know, because it's something you've never experienced before. So it's really hard to understand what it is until you get to that point.
Absolutely.
So the first deployment rolls around. We ended up deploying like the very end of December, beginning of January, which in Iraq, anyone that's been to Iraq in that time frame, like that period of the year, knows that it's muddy as fuck and rainy and cold and just shitty. It was probably some of the shittiest weather I'd ever seen in my life. And the way the sand is in Iraq, because it kind of turns into like peanut butter.
Yeah.
So like your boots will just get coated in mud. And so as a new guy, you know, you're doing a lot of like the cleaning of the hooch and stuff like that. So the first deployment, so we'll kind of get into right away. We deployed to Ramadi. So we flew into Al Asad Air Base. We stayed in Al Asad for like a day, and then we got on MH-47s and flew to Ramadi, and then that's where we ended up staying. Was in Ramadi at what's called Shark Base, which is a little bit of it's kind of outside the gate, but also inside the gate of Ramadi. Kind of weird. It's right along the river. There are a couple kind of like, I would say mansions, I guess.
Yeah.
Along the river. And then on the other side was Ramadi proper, like the actual town of Ramadi.
Yeah.
And you could look across the river, you could see all like the Marine Corps base, like all the Marine Corps activity that was happening on that side. And so we kind of got there, and the first mission we did to Fallujah, because Ramadi is right next to Fallujah. So Ramadi was kind of our base of operations, and we would drive out from Ramadi to Fallujah and do ops out there. And I remember the first mission we went out. This is how stupid, you know, a 21-year-old kid on his first deployment is I actually made like a this is the letter if something happens to me type of thing. And I gave it to my buddy who was an FO. And I was like, if something happens to me, man, pass this on. You know?
Yeah.
I'm like, what the fuck? Later on, I'm like, oh, man, I was fucking dumb. Like,
Yeah.
But I do remember driving out there and just seeing, like, obviously I'm looking through a thermal, and this was like Gen 1 Strikers. So the thermals are garbage.
Yeah.
Like you can't zoom or anything really on them. You can only adjust like kind of like the contrast. But just driving out there and you're like, holy shit, like this place is fucked up. And there's like rats all over the place and dogs running around, like pulling dead bodies and shit all over the place. It smells horrible. I remember driving down the road and kind of looking through the TC has a little thing that he can like put on the camera, like the screen to be either the driver's screen or the gun.
Yeah.
On the Striker on the RWS, and our TC had his on the driver's screen. I remember seeing these little flashes going by the front of the Striker. It's like people are shooting at us as we're driving down the road. Just kind of like sticking shit out the window and just lighting rounds off. And we hit a bunch of targets at deployment. You'll have to forgive me because it's been a long time and there was a lot of missions, so I don't remember like too many specifics of that first deployment. Just because as a private, like a brand new private, no one really clued me in on much. I would go to the briefings, but I didn't understand much of what was going on in terms of who we were looking for. Especially that first deployment, because we were doing like 2 missions a night. Like we get to a target and they'd be like, all right, we got another, everyone load back up. We got to go across town. Or we get there and it'd be like dry hole, go to the next one. And we just like go down the street. And it was kind of like that over and over again. I do remember one mission that was like the coolest mission that could have ever happened, and it got fucked up. But we had been watching these bad guys and they drove out into the desert and they kind of like circled their cars up. Yeah. They're like camping out there. And so the mission was 160th was going to fly us in kind of parallel to the cars, and Weapons Squad was going to run off the back and set up machine guns on tripods and just start laying waste. And I was the machine gunner that night. I was like, fuck yes. Like tripod, I can just do traverse and search and just light all these guys up and it'll be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, the 160th came the wrong direction and flew us directly over the bad guys. And so like 2 of the cars bolted, and then one guy, like there was like a poncho tent or whatever. Like a couple of guys stayed there. So the assaulters assaulted through that, and they killed like 2 dudes in that when they were assaulting through. And AC-130s shot up the vehicles that drove away. So they were like, hey, we need someone to go to a BDA and get DNA off the guys that we just blew up with the AC-130. Yep. So Weapons Squad and whatever squad was with us, get back on your 47 and go and check out the impact area. So if you don't know, a big giant shell in the middle of a desert will release a giant sandstorm, like to the point where you can't even see because the helicopter landed right into that, blew up more sand. So it's pitch black dark. You got your nods on, and we're using 14s at the time. And we have to try to find where these bodies are. So we all hook up our safety lines together and we're kind of online and we're kind of walking, can't see anything in front of you, tripping over dead bodies. We found dead bodies by tripping over them. I saw my first dead Iraqi in my life under nods. He'd been blown up. You could see like into his chest cavity. And you know, we got the DNA and the fingerprints and the pictures and everything, and then we fucking left. And I got smoked that night because I hit my team leader in the head with the 240 when I was getting on the bird. And you can imagine, like, anyone else, like any other situation, you know, everyone's like, "I just watch out." But at that time, you know, the team leaders, you know, I think things are a lot different than what they were back then.
Of course.
Back then, everyone was always very aggressive, very under a lot of pressure all the time. So, something as minor as that would cause the team leaders to be giant assholes about it. But
yeah,
it is what it is. We were all covered in fucking sand and disgustingness and shit like that. That's one of the main missions I remember. And I remember the car bombs that happened at Ramadi. So there was a morning we were out there doing striker maintenance, which was kind of like our morning schedule thing. You go out and make sure all the strikers are good to go. We're all out there, and I go into this. We had this big like corrugated steel shed that had all like the oil and stuff, and I'm in there getting the oil, and I hear like the ground kind of shakes a little. I'm like, huh. I guess someone fucking launched a mortar or something. I look out there and I see like everyone kind of stopping at the striker and kind of looking over, and then boom, this big giant explosion happens. All this shit starts raining down on top of us. And I see one of the squad leaders just sprinting to like the mansion thing. There's like a big giant, like a concrete mansion. Yep. He's just sprinting to that. So I see him running. I'm like, oh shit. So I start running too. And everyone, we all kind of like go in there in this mansion and kind of chill out and wait for the all clear or whatever. And turns out these guys had driven a suicide bomb into a checkpoint, an Iraqi army checkpoint. Blew the checkpoint, and then they had a truck bomb right behind it, like a big giant like dump truck that was going to go up to the Iraqi police chief's house or whatever and detonate. And this was all like a couple hundred meters away from our camp. And he detonated this giant fucking massive bomb right next to our camp, pretty much. So that blew the fuck out of everything. So that was my kind of like oh shit moment, because I thought, oh my god, because one of the things that had just happened on that deployment right before then was when those Chechens went in and kidnapped all those dudes in Iraq.
What year was this?
2007.
Okay.
So what had happened was they dressed as contractors, and they were driving SUVs, and they got through all the checkpoints, the Iraqi army checkpoints, and they kind of drove right into the middle of this compound.
Yeah.
And kidnapped like a lieutenant and a couple like specialists or something like that, and they ended up killing them. But that had just happened, so everyone was like super on edge about all the shit going down.
Yeah.
And then we always had there was like a glass factory that was out there outside of Ramadi, and there was always the worry because this was all during like the Juba Sniper thing going on in Fallujah and Ramadi.
Yeah.
So everyone was all jumpy about snipers and shit like that.
So for any of the viewers that don't know, what he's referencing is around like 2006, 2007, there was a lot of videos circulating on the internet, showing like insurgents in Iraq sniping, like U.S. soldiers. And it all kind of spread around, and people sort of mystified it into, one guy who's, running around sniping Americans. It ended up being separate incidents, of course, but that was a really big thing to come out of Iraq, I would say.
It was in Chris Kyle's book and in the movie and stuff. He tried to. There was the claim that he killed Juba or got into a sniper duel with Juba.
Yeah,
but who knows? I mean, there's a lot of sniping going around in those areas at that time. And so that deployment was fast and furious. I mean, we were doing missions every night, pretty much, over and over and over again. Went to the same place multiple times. You were always amazed at what you would see at some of these houses.
Yeah.
Some of the cars, some of the guns, some of the, just some of the really interesting, cool stuff that you'd find. So we came back after that deployment and went through the full training cycle. The training cycle in Ranger Battalion is kind of rinse, wash, repeat type of stuff. You do the same thing pretty much every year, just with kind of like a different scenario would come up that you would practice and train for. So start out with just individual shooting. And at this time was when they brought the SCAR to us.
Okay.
So we got the SCAR in 2007 is when we got it for that training cycle. They brought it to us and we started using it. And then we did our individual qualification, and then we did team, squad, platoon, and then all the way up to company live fires with them. We jumped with them, I think. Or no, we jumped with M4s, I think. I don't remember. Yep.
My bad. But for all the listeners, the SCAR is the Special Operations Forces Combat Assault Rifle. And that was a program developed by a Belgian manufacturer. They sent out these prototype weapons to, I think it was a platoon in 375, who initially deployed with those. And I know there's a lot of people who are interested in like weapons.
We didn't deploy with them at first.
Okay.
We did the testing for them. So we did the full gambit of all the testing for them before they were moved on to, I think the SEALs or Marines got them next. At the time it was MARSOC, I think, had just kind of come into existence. So I think they were messing with them next.
Yeah, around like 2007, 8.
Yeah. And so we got the SCARs and we did all the training with them and everything like that. It was during this time that I got in trouble. So the FN people, the people from FN that were doing the training with us, had told us this is not a classified program. This isn't anything crazy or anything like that. But in the end, we were told by our platoon sergeant, "Hey, don't talk about this."
Yep.
And I kind of talked about it on back in the old day, the message boards. There was AR15.com message board. Someone had been talking about how crappy the SCARs were or something, and I was like, "Hey, we're using them right now, and I think they're awesome."
Yeah.
And it turns out a first sergeant who was in RRD, well, I think it was a sergeant first class in RRD, saw it and knew my platoon sergeant and knew my platoon was doing the testing. So he contacted my platoon sergeant, told him, and then it got pushed up the chain, and I was very close to getting RFS'd for that, for OPSEC violation. But I was able to kind of make the claim that it's during Ranger Rendezvous, and you got a SCAR sitting out on display. You got guys standing out there with SCARs right now on display. So nothing I'm saying is anything that isn't already known to everyone.
Of course.
So I ended up getting an Article 15 for failure to obey my platoon sergeant. So I got docked some pay and I lost rank for like 3 months. And then we deployed for our second deployment in ACO after that. And that deployment was to, originally it was in Baqubah.
Okay.
And we got to Baqubah, like the first mission out, we rolled a striker. That was due to a team leader that we had that should not have been a team leader.
Yeah.
He shouldn't have really been in the Army. He was not a very good team leader. he ended up being a squad leader later on, and a dog guy. And I won't name any names because I'm not that type of person. But
Yeah, of course.
He rolled. He was the team leader that was TCing the striker that rolled into a ditch and rolled into water. The guys in the back, they had probably maybe 6 or 7 inches of air to breathe because the water got all the way up to the top of the vehicle. Sure. And everyone thought they were all dead inside the thing, but they ended up getting them out. And that became an issue in and of itself because we got all these air bottles from another unit, a JSOC unit that was there that had these like individual air bottles that had like the mouthpiece on them and stuff.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
the aqua longer.
Yeah, and so they issued all those to us in case we ever rolled into the water again.
Yeah.
And so after that rollover, we really did not do any missions in Baqubah after that. There was kind of a thing, I guess, at the time that they were kind of like, you guys kind of suck.
Yeah.
We did take. There was a SEAL team there. There was not a JSOC SEAL team. It was regular vanilla SEALs.
Yeah, like a number team.
Yeah, it was a numbered team. I don't remember which one, but they ended up getting in trouble. We did a mission with them where we drove them out in Target. They left a bunch of guns in the back of our strikers, and they ended up getting in trouble for drinking. Like they had like a party, and they all got drunk, and I think they got kicked out of the country after that.
Okay.
And then our kind of missions dried up in Baqubah, so we went to Tikrit. And so we packed up everything in Baqubah and flew to Tikrit. And there was another platoon from our company in Tikrit when we got there. And so we kind of linked up with them, and we would do kind of like either simultaneous missions or we would do alternating, just kind of depending on what was coming up at the time.
Yep.
And that's when we had this really big mission pop up. So we went out one night, and the snipers that were with us were going onto a rooftop across from the target building, and some guy poked his head out of his roof door, like the door to his roof, and then had like a 25 cal pistol and shot the snipers.
Fuck.
One of our snipers got hit in the head, and the round hit his nods, the rhino mount, and then lodged in his forehead right above his eye. But all that came over the radio was, Sergeant so-and-so's shot in the head.
Yeah.
So everyone on target was like, oh my God, he's dead. Because no one got any more updates after that. But they were throwing hand grenades down the stairs, and they were shooting all down the stairs and stuff. And they ended up catching the guys that shot him, and we arrested him, and we got the targets that we were after in the target building. And we drove back. And again, no one ever told us what happened to the sniper until later on. We all thought he was like seriously wounded, because all we ever got was, he got shot in the head. And so we get back to Tikrit, and we're putting the strikers away, and our squad leader comes out and he's like, "Hey, get your kit back on. We're going back out." We're like, "What the fuck? Like, we're going back out?" He's like, "Yeah, but we're going on birds this time." And we're like, "What the fuck?" And so we all loaded onto the helicopters, and we flew to what's that one? What's north of Fallujah, where ISIS took over?
Mosul.
Yeah, we flew up to Mosul, and there was like a village outside of Mosul that apparently like the top guy we were after, like I think it was AAM, like Abu Ansur, whatever.
Mansiri, I think.
Yeah, Mansiri. It was whatever guy we were after at the time. I don't remember who it was. I think it was AAM. But apparently he had been spotted in this village with like his entourage of SUVs and stuff. So the platoon that was up there in Mosul, I think, was like a SECO platoon. They had strikers, and they came out and blocked off the village.
Yeah.
And then our platoon and another platoon from ACO came in on 47s, and this was all daytime. we flew in, we got off, and then we kind of like assaulted through this whole village, like cleared like all the way through it, like kicked down fences, like gates and stuff, and like went through people's houses, looking for this dude. And we found out afterwards that like he left before we even got out there. But it was cool though. It was a daytime mission, you know, a lot of interaction with people. We didn't shoot at anyone. No one shot at us because, like I said, they all left. We did have, I mean, there was like interspersed like stuff throughout these deployments that I, you know, my ACO deployments were my first ones, and they were a long time ago. So, and I've had some head injuries since then, so the ACO deployments are a little bit harder for me to remember.
Yeah, of course.
There was, you know, we got in some situations where some guys got blown up a bunch, and like I said, there's other stuff that happened on those ACO deployments. So I just can't remember details.
Yeah, of course. That's completely fine. So I know that you had 7 deployments under your belt.
Yeah.
I want to briefly speak about if you can go into any detail about it. I'm not sure what year specifically this was, but if I remember correctly, you and your unit, or at least guys from your unit, they were a part of a larger effort to try to intercept Iranian IED makers, stuff like that.
So that was a majority of that Iraq deployment in ACO, I believe, is we were going after a lot of foreign fighters, and that's where we would find a bunch of Iranian passports or Iranian Republican Guard type of stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of Iranian weapons, because they were kind of interspersing themselves throughout the region at the time. And a lot of stuff from Syria was a lot of issues that we were having as well, up on the Syrian border. I remember that the second deployment, we were hitting some areas around the Syrian border. So I can kind of skip ahead, I guess.
Yeah, no problem.
My last Iraq deployment I did, we were kind of like the on-call company for the entire country, because we were the only company in the country at the time.
Okay.
So we did a lot of flying around to various places because, you know, we were the only ones there. So anytime anything came up, we were the ones that were doing it. So there was a lot of like 6-hour flights and stuff like that.
Yeah.
To hit targets. So that's where we got into using CV-22s, was on that deployment too. Because we could get more range out of them when they worked.
Yeah.
But yeah, every deployment that I was on in Iraq, you were dealing with either foreign fighters or, and a lot of that was Iranians, Iranian like Republican Guard or whatever their secret services or whatever.
Cuts Force, I believe it is.
Yeah. So, you know, you would find stuff like that on target. I know that I think the guys that were in the Baghdad area were probably interacting with it a lot more than we were in Ramadi, and I think in Tikrit we probably dealt with it as well. But a majority of the guys I think in Baghdad were doing a lot more of that type of stuff, and I know the JSOC guys were doing a lot more of that type of stuff.
Okay.
They were doing that majority of those hits.
All right.
Because our guys in Baghdad were majority of the time working with the JSOC elements.
Okay. So to sort of segue into that before we go over your last deployment, or last few deployments, I guess. So a lot of people are interested in the relation between Ranger Regiment and special missions units like Delta or Dev Group. So I know that during especially like the later stages of Afghanistan, there was a lot of intermingling between guys who were on the line in regiment and dudes who are at higher levels in JSOC. So if you could take us into a specific deployment, if you worked with any of these units bilaterally, to hear that.
Let's see. My first deployment was just us, really. We didn't really interact with. We had a group of people who were adjacent to our compound that were not, I would say they weren't Army and they weren't Navy and they weren't Marines. They were. I don't think they were military is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, so they were, a government agency.
Yeah, we called them OGAs, other government agencies.
Yeah.
So they were there. They worked on our compound. They probably had interactions with JSOC. They drove around in civilian vehicles, things like that. When I was my second deployment in Iraq, we had those regular SEALs, vanilla SEALs around us, but our interaction with SMUs on that deployment was I can't think of any time that we worked with them really.
Okay.
At least like my platoon. Other platoons did.
Of course.
I know our third platoon was in Baghdad that second deployment, and they were working with the unit in Baghdad, I believe, at that time.
Okay.
That would be like 2007 timeframe, like October 2007-ish. And so they were doing ops with those guys. And then my first deployment in Afghanistan, we did interact with some of the guys, the Navy element of JSOC. We did interact with them on a couple times because they were technically our overarching command. In that time frame, because when I went to Afghanistan for the first time, Afghanistan was fucking dead. Like nothing was going on in Afghanistan when I went there the first time.
So
militarily, like
of course. So when was this first deployment, and where were you
in Afghanistan?
Yeah.
So it would have been 2008. Would have been my first deployment to Afghanistan. 2008.
Okay.
2008 was my first deployment to Afghanistan. It was Delta Company's first deployment.
Okay.
I guess I should get into that first. So we came back from that Iraq deployment that I was in ACO with. And that's kind of like came back and they were forming the Delta Company. The Delta Company was going to be the 4th Rifle Company for every battalion.
Okay.
At the time, the SMUs were having a lot of issues because of their deployment cycle. Like it was so continuous. They were having a lot of trouble with guys being able to continue to do the ops.
Yeah, they were experiencing a lot of burnout.
Yeah, and so they formed a 4th squadron in each of those groups, and so we kind of followed suit, and we're like, we'll form a 4th company. The idea, I think, at the time was that they were floating around was that 4th company was going to gain some experience, and then they were going to form a new Ranger Battalion.
Okay.
That was kind of the plan at first. I think it fell to the wayside when the war ended. So we formed Delta Company, and what they did to form Delta Company was they had a bunch of new guys that finished with RIP, because they didn't have RASP yet still. They just had RIP.
Yeah.
They finished RIP, and then they kind of put them into these companies that kind of were skeleton companies. And there was all new guys, and then they were pulling platoon sergeants from experienced groups and squad leaders from really experienced squad leaders. So like my platoon sergeant was an RRD guy who got blown up by a tank with Sather, the JTAC.
Yeah, Scott.
Yeah, he was in that vehicle that got blown up by the tank.
Okay.
And so he came over as our platoon sergeant. Our first sergeant was that RRD guy that had told my platoon sergeant about the SCAR post. He was my first sergeant.
Yeah.
My squad leader was Sergeant Foster. He's currently the battalion sergeant major in 187 in the Rakkasans. He's their command sergeant major. He's got 2 silver stars, and he got them in the same deployment in the same month.
Shit.
So he's and he's got a lot of Purple Hearts.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But you know that they just specifically designed the Delta companies, at least 375. I don't know about the other Delta companies and the other battalions, but to give you an example, Sergeant First Class Petrie's Delta Company 275.
Leroy.
So yeah, so it kind of gives you an idea of who they were picking to be the squad leaders up there.
Of course.
It's the same way they were doing it for 375. They picked the best guys they could get. And so they took, I wouldn't say they took the best guys they could get as privates to put over there to kind of fill in the spots. But I was one of them. And the reasoning that my platoon sergeant gave me in ACO was like, it gives you a fresh start. You know, because my incident that happened with me with the SCAR, it kind of put me on the outs with some people. And
yeah, of course.
like, we'll send you over there, give you a fresh start. And I'm grateful every day that that's what happened, because I kind of met some of my best friends when we got to that platoon, got to that squad. Because we're the founding members of Delta Company, 2nd Platoon Weapons Squad. You know, that was kind of our thing. We were so happy together because we worked together really well.
Yeah.
And we kind of were able to pull SOPs from all the different companies and make it into our own. So we were really effective at what we did. And so we had to go through an entire training cycle to get certified. And that included jumping into Fort Irwin, California, and doing a certification exercise. And so we jumped into California. It's a fucking horrible jump. Probably the worst jump of my life because we were so overloaded, because we had to have like 2 weeks worth of shit because we were going to do like continuous ops. We did a bunch of operations in Fort Irwin, got certified, came home, and then we deployed as Delta Company for the first time. It was like the first time they'd ever had a new company deploy to combat since Panama.
Yeah.
You know, so we went into our first deployment. We went to Sharana first in Afghanistan, and Sharana was. So let me kind of backtrack a little. So we got to Bagram
Airfield,
and we did a mission, one mission, like the second night we were there. So it was like half the platoon's first deployment, and it was probably half of all of our guys that had deployments had only done Iraq deployments, really.
Yeah,
most of them. There's a few guys like our Bravo Company guys that had done Afghanistan deployments, but if you were in ACO or you were in CCO, you more than likely had never been to Afghanistan before. So it was like our first missionary, and we had no clue what we were doing, to be honest. It was very difficult. I think we left a ladder on target. My best friend pretty much he dropped a squad radio, one of the little those little green radios. It fell out of it. Yeah. Luckily it wasn't filled. It had no fill. The only reason we took it is because our team leader told us to.
Yeah.
And we're like, why are we taking this? We don't have a fill. We don't even have any thing to hook it up to. But he took it and it fell out of his kit on target. So he got smoked pretty furiously for that.
Oh yeah.
And so from Bath we flew to Sharana. And when we were at Sharana, we did nothing. There was nothing going on in Sharana. And this was 2008, so everything was happening in Iraq at the time. Nothing was really happening in Afghanistan. in terms of like major operations. And finally, our platoon sergeant was like, "We're not staying here anymore. We're going to go to Salerno, FOB Salerno in Coast."
Yeah.
And so the original plan was to drive there, and we're like, "Fuck that, let's just fly." So we flew there, and they had a bunch of Humvees that were there for us. So it was weapons squad's job to get all the Humvees set up and get them all ready. So we did that. Probably about 2 nights after we got there, they're like, "Hey, we're driving up to the Korengal Valley. We're going to," at the time it was called Cop Wilderness, and it was this fucking like 2 giant mountains on either side, and they kind of came down into this like crevice, and inside the crevice was where they had the cop, and it was like a couple tents, like a mechanic's shack, and a shower cart in the middle, and they were getting rocketed and mortared like every day, all day, every day, pretty much. And that night, we left. We all got in Humvees and found out my driver didn't even have a driver's license in civilian life. He was one of our 13 Foxes, one of our FOs. And he was my driver for this vehicle. And by the way, we're driving like 6 hours at night into the mountains of Afghanistan. This motherfucker doesn't even have a driver's license. But we drove all the way out there. And the way out there, it was eerie, weird. Because it was, the scariest kind of feeling, the eeriest feeling I ever had, as we pulled up to this compound. That was an American compound, at least I thought it was, but it had a little gate down, a barred gate thing, and a guard shack, and all the lights were on, but no one was there. Not a single person was there. Yeah. And so we had to get up and like lift the guard thing up and like drive in there, and I'm like looking around, there's no one out. It looked like everyone had just left. And I was like, "Oh shit, like this is scary as fuck." But we drove 6 hours into the mountains. Off in the distance, I got to see some Apaches shooting some rockets into the mountain. I didn't know what they were doing. They were probably engaging someone or something.
Yeah.
But I got to see that happen at night. It was really cool. Got up into the mountains, and we're driving along this like 1-lane road. And I'm looking at my left, and I see the tire of the Humvee, and it's probably like maybe 4 inches from the edge of this fucking like 40, 50 foot drop off into this river. And I'm like, "Oh fuck, like I'm gonna die out here. Like this is crazy."
Yeah.
And so we pull up to Cop Wilderness that night, and I'll get off the vehicles, and the PL gets out, and he's like, "Hey, the target that we're trying to hit is like 6K up the road. Do you guys want to go and do it right now?" And I'm sitting there, I'm just a dumb private. I'm sitting in the back, and I'm like, "Fuck no. Like, no." And the PL's like, "Oh no, let's go and do it." And so we end up driving out there, and we roll over the Humvee that I'm in. We rolled off of a cliff.
Shit.
And I was in the turret. It wasn't a very tall cliff. It was probably about 5 or 10 feet, but we rolled onto the side of the Humvee and then rolled onto the top. All the guys, they all got thrown out of the back. They got thrown clear, but I was still in the turret, kind of like, oh my God, I'm going to die. Rolled over. All the ammo boxes and everything fell on top of me. I couldn't get out for a little while. They had to like pull me out. We rolled the vehicle back over, and we're like, "Fuck it, let's go back. Like, we'll hit the target later." So we drove back to Cop Wilderness with this truck that had just been rolled over. Still ran. The 240 was broken on it, but it still ran. So we got back, and they had, like I said, they'd been getting mortared and rocketed like every day. So our platoon sergeant was like, "Hey, grab all their shit, like all their leftover shit or shit they don't want to use, like ammo wise, and throw it on your trucks." And we drove up to the top of the ridge line, and they had like a range set up that they never used. And he's like, "Hey, just start shooting shit, like getting 240s going, start shooting Gustavs, shoot some mortars, shoot 50 cals. Let's let everyone know who we are and what we're doing here. And we fucking tore it up. Like, we were out there for like an hour just blowing shit up and shooting, having a great time. And they didn't get rocketed or mortared while we were there at all. So we went and did the mission. It was right next to Pakistan. We're pretty sure we may have stepped into Pakistan. We're not totally sure. That's literally how close we were to the border. Like, we were right there. Yeah, so did the mission. I think we killed like 3 guys on that target. Did the mission, left. As soon as we left Cop Wilderness, they got rocketed.
Yeah.
Literally like hours after we left. Went back to Salerno, and then we did a bunch more missions out of Salerno in that deployment. And that was probably one of the more fun ones, fun deployments, because we had a really good vibe as a squad and as a platoon.
Yeah.
And it was just us. You know, there wasn't any other platoon out there with us. It was really just us. Although our 3rd platoon came and stole some of our targets. And one of their squad leaders got shot. He's still in too.
Oh shit! Is he still in the regiment?
No, he's I think he's a sergeant major in Hawaii.
Okay, all right.
He was in Best Ranger. I think he won Best Ranger a couple years ago. Sergeant Horshager.
Okay, all right.
But he got shot when like one of the missions that I was more excited to do. That's when I watched the guy shit in the water right in front of me. He came out of his house and like squatted right in front of me and took a shit. I was like, dude, really? He was like staring at me. I was in the turret of the Humvee and he was just like staring at me, like copping a squat in front of me. I was like, God damn it, dude. But we kept the AK that Sergeant Horshager got shot with. They kept the AK. I think the AK is still probably in the arms room because they had a round that went right through it.
Sure.
And that deployment was cool because, you know, and then the FOB got attacked while we were there too. FOB Salerno got attacked. We were actually on the airfield waiting to go on a mission, and we saw these tracers flying over us. And then we went and did the mission while the FOB was being attacked. We came back, and like one of the washing machines had gotten hit by a round, and then that deployment ended, and we came back, and then training cycle went through again.
So was this a deployment that you had just came back on? Was this the deployment before you deployed to support JSOC?
So this was the deployment before my last Iraq deployment.
Okay.
We did support JSOC in that last Iraq deployment, but not as often. So I broke my back after coming back from that deployment. I broke my back in February of 2009.
All right.
Fast roping. I had gone through Pre-Ranger in December of that year, and I got dropped from Pre-Ranger, and they were going to send me back to Pre-Ranger the next, like in that February. I got my EIB, and then February, like the end of February, was going to be the next Pre-Ranger class. So I didn't want to have go into Pre-Ranger with fucked up hands, and I always got blisters when I did fast roping.
Yeah.
So I double gloved like a moron, and I couldn't grip enough to slow myself down. So I fucking fell 40 feet right onto my ass, and I got a spiral fracture in my L1 vertebrae.
Shit.
And so I was laid up for 30 days. I got 30 days of con leave, and I had a back brace and everything. And that's when I did the soft armors course.
Okay. Before we actually get into that, just to backtrack a little bit. So are you saying that you had done 3 deployments and you hadn't had your Ranger tab?
Yeah. Yep. So I will tell you, I am the probably longest tenured person in Ranger Battalion that didn't have a tab.
Shit.
Yeah.
Because usually I know that especially now, like right after RASP, you go to Ranger School. So
yeah. So at the time, the way it kind of worked in Ranger Battalion for a while is if you were good at your job, they kept you. It didn't matter what you did. I mean, I have friends that got multiple alcohol-related incidences, but they were really, really good at their job. And the way that at the time they kind of looked at Ranger School was get it because it's the only way you can get promoted. But if you're good at your job, if you're good at what you do, we'll keep you around until we don't need you anymore. And that's pretty much what happened. It's pretty much what happened to me. After I broke my back, I don't think there was really any way that I could have physically completed Ranger School. I mean, I may have been able to, but physically at the time, because of what happened afterwards, I don't think it would have been. I'm surprised I was able to stay in the Army as long as I had. So after breaking my back, I went to the armorers course, the crane armorers course in Indiana, which was fun because like every night we'd go to the University of Indiana and just fuck around and drink, get in fights, that type of stuff.
And I apologize again, but for any of the viewers that don't know, the Crane Armor Course or NSWC Crane or Naval Surface Warfare Center Crane Division, that is the division that develops weapons for naval special warfare and also for U.S. SOCOM as a whole. Some of you who are more keen on weapons might know that Crane developed or supported the development of the Mark 18, Mark 12 SPR, gadgets like that. So.
Yeah, it was a really cool course. It was run by like these dudes that were former like CIA like contractors and shit, and they would tell stories about being in like South America, like flying around in Hueys and civilian clothes and shit. But it was a really good course. I had a really good time with it. Came back from that course, and the deployment was rolling around, but I was still on a dead man profile. And then there was talk of med board at that point. So I didn't want to be med boarded. I didn't want to leave my platoon.
Yeah.
So I went to our regimental surgeon and I was like, hey, can you clear me so I can deploy? And he was like, can you do everything? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Clear me. So I went through the whole process of getting cleared. They got cleared the day before we deployed. So none of my bags had been packed on the pallets or anything. I actually had to bring my bags with me on the plane.
Shit.
And I had a note from the battalion's or the regimental surgeon saying I could have a place to sleep on the floor. And we got over there, got to Iraq. We were in Tikrit again. It was my second time to Tikrit.
Yeah.
And because I was still technically on a dead man profile for another couple weeks, they were like, hey, we're going to put you in the talk. And so I was like, okay, I'll go work in the talk. I didn't want to. The talk, if you don't know, is the Tactical Operations Center.
Yeah.
It's where all the Predator feeds, all the ISR feeds are in. It's where the commanders sits. It's where all the intel people are. You make coffee, you watch movies, you answer phones.
Yeah. That's where the task force commander would be on some missions, watching, raids go down live.
Yeah. And so my job was to man the phones. I was day shift. So my job was to man the phones, to watch ISR, to take notes on ISR. And then I could direct somewhat. They would give me like, all right, this has got to go to this area. So you go into the back and you type in like where it's got to go and it would get sent up. Most of the ISR back in the day was Like pred feeds, pred stuff was all done from like North Dakota, was where the guy would be flying out of. But we had some smaller stuff that would be flown from like within the compound, like within the top.
Yeah.
And then, so I did that for about 13 days. And then they finally got a mission. And that mission went pretty fucking horribly. So let's see. They got to the target building and they were in placing blocking positions. And some bad guy was in another building and he opened fire on one of the teams moving to the blocking position. And as the guys were crossing the street, one of the rounds hit the ground and ricocheted up.
Yeah.
And hit Ryan McGhee, my team leader. It hit him in his armpit and went and nicked his aorta. And
shit.
He ended up dying out there. And then the platoon, they were getting hit by grenades. And so pretty much half of the platoon ended up getting shrapnel from grenades. Okay. And all this I had to watch happen on ISR. So it kind of messed me up. It really kind of put a lot of like survivor's guilt in me.
Of course.
And so they got back from the mission. They told me, hey, you're on dead man profile. You need to, and you're also in these little books, these little red books, and it was like your kind of last will and testament type stuff.
Yeah.
And it would also have like who's going to escort your remains home, and I was on there to escort his remains. So I escorted his remains back to Delaware.
Okay.
To his mom, and then so went home after 13 days over there. Brought McGhee home, and then we did like the funeral and everything, and that's when RASP started. RASP became a thing, that deployment.
Okay.
And so they graduated like 200 dudes in the first RASP class.
Oh shit!
Huge amount of people in the first RASP class. So I came back from that from bringing McGhee home, and we had pretty much a company of new guys at Delta Company, and we lost a lot of them. A lot of them got DUIs or quit within like a month. And I was only home for a month. I came home and I was going back over on the halfway bird. And I was bringing all the new guys with us on the halfway bird because my two buddies were going back for Ranger School. And I didn't want to leave my squad leader to be the only one with a bunch of new guys.
Yeah, of course.
So I went back over. And by that point, I had kind of weaseled my way out of my dead man profile. So the rest of that deployment was me, like, teaching guys. I was teaching the new guys what to do. That was kind of like what my job was, that deployment. Because, I was really good at what I did as weapons squad. That was one of the only things that I think I can like pat myself on the back for in Ranger Regiment was when it came to weapons squad, I was the best. I've got awards for being the best weapons squad team out there. So I made sure that I was the best at it. And I made sure that the guys I was with were as equal to me as they could be in terms of shooting, in terms of what they were doing. So that deployment was really shitty. It was middle of summer in Iraq, so it was like 120 degrees like all the time. And we were doing a lot of kind of like flying all over the country type missions because we were the only company in the country at the time. We did work with a couple of the unit guys. One of the main missions I worked on them with We were flying in 60s. We landed on the X, and I ran to my blocking position. By the time I got set up, they'd already cleared the house. You know, they were quick. They fucking knew what they were doing.
Of course.
That was one thing I gathered about those guys, is they were professional as hell. You know, they did the mission and they did it well. So that was kind of my main experience with them. They were, I think we did a couple missions where we interacted with them and did a couple hits with them. And it wasn't really like there were a lot of guys that were doing the missions with us. It'd probably be about 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people think it's like a whole platoon worth of operators. It's usually around 4 or 5 for most of those missions. They kind of augment us more so than we augment them.
Yeah.
And then, so after that deployment, came home. Getting home from that deployment was kind of like the worst part of my time in regiment, I think, because I had done more damage to my back on that deployment. I ended up herniating a couple discs and like shifting a bunch. So yeah. I mean, it fucked me up. I'm still fucked up from it. I think if I would have taken the time to actually recover, I would be okay more, but I didn't. So I ended up getting more fucked up. So I ended up getting moved. I ended up getting moved to the arms room.
Yeah.
Which I didn't like, but I was hurt. You know, I was going through physical therapy at the time. I was really not feeling good about it.
Yeah.
I was really kind of down on myself. I really wasn't. I wasn't feeling like I was doing my job right. It was really kind of messed up time period for me. Really hard being away from your squad, being away from your friends. While they were out doing training, you know, I was in the fucking arms room. Eventually, though, I got put in like, you know, more of like the head armor, I guess you would say.
Yeah, most senior.
Yeah, because we had an E5 in there who had his tab and everything, and I don't know why he was working in there, but probably because no one liked him. But
yeah,
he was working in there, and he ended up getting out of there somehow, and I ended up signing for everything. But that was after the deployment. So rolled into the end of that year. I can't really say anything cool happened during that time that I was arms room, because nothing cool happened.
Yeah.
It was pretty shitty. But we rolled into that 2010, and we got surged. And for anyone that doesn't know, a surge is when you go before you're supposed to.
Yeah.
And it was just our company that got surged. And so, in that deployment, I ended up getting, I was arms room for that deployment. So I ended up getting attached to our first platoon, ended up going to Logar.
Okay.
And while they were in Logar, they were supporting the Navy's JSOC element that was there.
Okay. Dev group.
Yep, and that's where I got a lot of interaction with those guys, and where I kind of developed kind of my "these guys are assholes" mentality.
Yeah,
because that's the way they carried themselves, is that they were assholes. They would have things set up in a manner that was kind of demeaning towards everyone else. So when I got over there, originally I was supposed to go and work in the JOC. I was supposed to be like doing what I did the previous deployment, but when I was hurt.
Yeah.
But the Navy guys didn't want me in there. I don't know why. Whatever reason they had, they didn't want me in there. I was like, sure, whatever, fuck it. So I worked with my buddy who was the mechanic out there, and we did the day shift operations. So, or no, night shift. We were night shift there. So we kind of we drove the guys down to the airfield if they were going on a mission, put them on the bus, and we drive them out there.
Yeah.
We fucked around a lot, did nothing, played video games, worked out. Logar was kind of my worst deployment because it took the longest because I wasn't doing anything cool. And then I also lost two friends that were good buddies of mine, Santora and Kubik. Santora was a RIP buddy of mine. We had gone through RIP together. He had gone to Mortars and then came over to Delta Company when he got his tab. And then Kubik was the weapons squad guy from 1st Platoon. And he had ended up being a team leader. And they both got killed on a mission where they were trying to get women and children out of the way. They both got silver stars for it.
Yeah.
And they were good dudes. And that deployment really kind of messed me up because we also lost Captain Comfort, who was our FSO. He stepped on an IED with my platoon, 2nd Platoon. They were down in Kandahar.
Yeah.
He stepped on an IED and he got killed. That's also the deployment that the Osprey went down with ACO 3rd Platoon guys back in that day. So that Osprey crashed, pretty much wiped out half of 3rd Platoon ACO. Only one person died, but everyone else was really fucked up from that deployment, that mission. Who else got killed that deployment? It was a really bad deployment for 3rd Bat. We had a lot of guys wounded, a lot of guys killed.
Was the Ranger who got killed during the helicopter crash, was that James Patton?
No, Jimmy Patton died back in like 2000. Oh no, Patton died in a helicopter crash. I think the deployment before that, or no, he may have died during that deployment too. But the CV-22 crash was Jankiewicz.
Okay, all right.
He was in the CV-22. Patton died. I think Patton did die that deployment in a helicopter crash.
Okay.
In Iraq, I think. No, that's
yeah. I believe it was Iraq in a 60.
Yeah. It was either that deployment or it was the deployment before that. I can't remember. I think it was that deployment. But yeah, I mean, that deployment for me was very boring. I didn't get to go out on any missions. I tried to get them to let me go out as a turret gunner and stuff, but they didn't. They already had their own guys, so
yeah.
And after that, we came home, and I went to my old platoon sergeant, and I said, "Hey, Sergeant, I want to come back." He's like, "Sure." The only problem was I never told my first sergeant that that's what I was doing, and pretty much I like signed over all the arms room stuff to another guy. And I went back to the platoon. I was hanging out in the platoon AO. I was hanging out with my squad, and the first sergeant comes in there. He's like, "What the fuck?" He's like, "What do you think you're doing?" I was like, going back to the platoon, first sergeant." He's like, "What?" Like, who fucking told you could do that? I was like, "Well, I asked Sergeant, my platoon sergeant." He's like, "Is your platoon sergeant the fucking first sergeant?" I was like, "No." He's like, "Well, fuck. Don't ask him. Ask me next time, all right? But you're fucking good. Just stay up here." And I was like, "Okay." So I got to get back with my old platoon. I wanted to go back with them. I wanted to go back with my old squad. And luckily, my platoon sergeant was like, "Hell yeah, man. Come on back." And my squad leader was still there too. And so went back to my old platoon, my old squad, and we deployed again to we ended up going to Salerno again. There's a lot of there's only a few places you can end up going to when you're in Ranger Regiment. You go to the same place a lot of times.
Yeah.
So we ended up going to Salerno again, and that deployment was a bit more kinetic. We got in a little bit more action during that deployment because we were doing multiple hits. Really good. We had one mission where it was like a one platoon, but we kind of separated between two birds and like landed on the target and landed on the X. As soon as we got out, got into like shit right off the bat. As soon as we got out, we got into a firefight. The other half of the platoon got in a firefight with their guy. That the picture that I think is going to be on here of me in that kind of field. In the background, there's women crying over their dead guys.
Yeah.
And then we used that mission because we killed those guys, and then their buddies came over from Pakistan for their funeral. And when the buddies came over, we tracked them, and when we hit them the night after the funeral, and that's when my two buddies got their close combat kills. The one guy got his Purple Heart for that one because he got stabbed through the hand by the bad guy. So and that was a pretty interesting call on the radio. You know, knife kill, 2 of them.
Yeah.
And the PL was like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
So you know that deployment was one of the other fun ones because it was kind of like the same crew from the first Salerno deployment. So we had kind of the same interactions. We got blown up by an IED like right outside of the gate. Kind of pissed us all off because that mission kept on getting canceled. Like at night, we would go out to the airfield, get on the helicopters, and they'd start taking off, and then they'd cancel the mission because of weather. But it was our battalion XO at the time was really intent on getting us to go out. He was like, just load up in the strikers and go out in strikers. And we got out the door, got out of the Salerno, made a right going down the road and got blown up right in front of a A&A checkpoint. And we're like, these motherfuckers knew it was going to happen because I was watching them because I was lead gunner in the striker, and I was watching them on thermals, and they were all like poking their heads over the wall, like watching us, waiting for us to get blown up. I was like, these guys know what's going on.
Of course.
And so we had a good time that deployment. We got in a lot of fun missions, a lot of cool kind of like things to see. That's the deployment that they had the the unit had a MH-47 crash, and then our guys had to go and try to get them out. And on the way out there, the helicopter that they were flying in, the hydraulics failed, and they crashed in the Korengal Valley.
Okay.
It was a hard landing. It wasn't a crash, but everyone got off the bird, and they were like in the middle of this fucking valley. And it was the Korengal. And they ended up getting out of there, and they secured the 47, and Sea Stallion came and picked up the 47 and flew it off. But it was cool because they got to run into one of our old squad leaders that was in the unit at the time. Got to run into him again and say hi to him.
Yeah.
And then, that deployment was fun. We had a good time. And then we came home, rinse, repeat, did training cycle again. That training cycle was a little bit different for me because we started getting kind of different guys in the squad. Some of my buddies were getting out. We were getting a lot more new guys coming in, and then we rolled into my last deployment in Ranger Battalion. And my last deployment ever was going back to Sharana. At the time, we went right back to Sharana, and it was winter time, and it was snowy, and it was shitty, like knee deep, waist deep snow on most of the targets that we hit.
Yeah.
Really cold, like really fucking cold. That's still mission. So I would say probably like 2 missions into that deployment was when our EOD guy got shot in the head. Jordan Stevenson. He's on. You probably find a story about him on Facebook and stuff. We landed on the X, and his job was to go and put a ladder up and go and clear the cars that were in the courtyard.
Okay.
And visually clear them, make sure they weren't like IEDs or anything like that. As we came up, he climbed up to the top of the ladder, and the bad guy saw his head and took a round. He took an AK round right to the face, pretty much, like right below the brim of his helmet. Blew off the side of his head, and he fell off the ladder. It was probably a 16-foot ladder. And our medics got to work on him right away. And then everyone lit up the house. But due to ROE, we couldn't blow it up. The guy was sitting there with the Gustav, like, let me go. I want to blow this motherfucker up. I had a round ready to go. I was going to Gustav the fuck out of that place. But due to ROE, we weren't allowed to.
Yeah.
So we had like tear gas it a bunch and all this other shit. Eventually, we did capture the guy, and his wife was wounded or something like that because he used her as a human shield, which is fairly common for those guys to do.
Yeah.
So we got Stevenson package. Everyone thought he was going to die. Like, he got shot in the head. Like, half of his head was gone. His brains were falling out of his head. But the medics, they fucking saved him. Got him back to the cache, and they brought him home, and he's alive today.
Yeah.
And luckily, you know that we didn't lose anyone from our platoon in that deployment. And it was my last deployment. It was kind of bittersweet, you know. It was one of those things where you don't have the same guys that you were there with to begin with. And so it's kind of like the changing of the guard. You start seeing different people come in, and you're kind of like, I don't know if I want to be around these people because they're not the same dudes. Not saying they were bad guys or anything like that, but it just wasn't the same when you didn't have like your buddies.
Yeah, that bond is just not there. You know?
Oh yeah, and we had a really good bond. You know, there were like 3 or 4 of us that were really kind of like really hung out all the time after work and stuff. And so we came back from that deployment, and that's when they were kind of like, hey, we think you need to move on from regiment because it's affecting your career. Because at the time I'd been there for 6 years, and I was an E4 still. Because you can't get promoted without your tab in Ranger Regiment. And they were like, you know, what we want to do is we'll send you over to a TRADOC unit, and you can go and start getting healthy again. Go to like get back surgery or whatever needs to get it done.
Yeah, of course.
And go to Ranger School and come back. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And I got sent to 229, which at the time was the basic training unit.
Did you say 239?
229.
Okay.
So it's the 2nd Battalion of the 29th Infantry.
Yeah.
And now it's something completely different. But at the time there was 129, which ran like the Striker course, and they did testing. They would do demonstrations of like new technology, like all those ones you see with the guys wearing like the new shit, like the camera system helmet thing.
Yeah, the IBS.
Yeah, those guys were all 129. So they were like the tester guys.
Okay.
And it would have been really hard for me to kind of like get healthy if I was going to a unit that was doing that type of stuff. So I went to 229, which was like the basic training group. So the first day I show up there, I sign in and I show up, and they're like, hey, the first sergeant wants to meet you. So I go in there, and this dude looks like your quintessential armored infantry guy. Like, he's got a flat top, kind of chunky.
Yeah.
And he's like sitting there in a chair. He's got tanker boots on. And he's like, all right, sit down. And I sit down. He's like, hey, I want you to know this isn't like Ranger Regiment, okay? And I'm like, oh man, like here it comes. He's gonna fucking like tell me about how I can't be like a cowboy or whatever. And he's like, I hope you have hobbies. I was like, what? He's like, you better have hobbies, because if you're not doing anything at work, I'm gonna send you home. And I was like, what? What is going on here? He's like, you come in here, you come in, you do the formation. If there's nothing going on, you're going home. I was like, holy fuck. I hit the fucking jackpot.
Oh yeah.
And I met my crew that I was working with, and it was like a master sergeant and sergeant first class, and then a couple E5s. And they're like, hey, how long you been in? I gave them my ERB, and like, dude, we're sending you to the board like next week. We'll get you your 5. And so I went to the board, and the sergeant major was like, all right, tell me the soldier creed. I was like, I don't know the soldier creed, sergeant major. He was like, what do you mean? I was like, I've never heard it in my life. And he was like, do you know the Ranger creed? And I gave him the Ranger creed, and he's like, all right, you're good.
That'll do.
Yeah, I was like, okay, because he was in Ranger Battalion before too, so
okay,
he kind of knew what I was coming from.
Yeah.
And so my job at 229 was a instructor for mounted react to contact. So what we would do is we would drive around the Humvees. We'd put all the privates in the Humvees. We'd go down the road. IED would get set off, or the OP4 would shoot at us.
Yeah.
We got to get out of the vehicles and do like that type of shit. So it was really simple. It was really easy, really decent job. I honestly had a good time doing it. A couple of my buddies that were actually in my company, that one of them got a DUI and got kicked out, and the other one was having family issues, and so he got kicked out. And this is all in like 2012, 2013 timeframe, and that's when they kind of started doing the whole like clearing house. They started getting rid of a bunch of people.
Drawing down.
Yeah, and so they came over to 229 with me, and I had a good time with them. During that time, I got that advanced situational awareness school, and that was a pretty cool course. It was taught by a civilian contractor who was a cop, and he was a CIA contractor for a while. And it was kind of like, you're looking for visual cues to identify people. Identify hierarchies and organizations just based on like how people interact with each other. So
a bit of like human intelligence, human.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what it was. And then that was just kind of like the basic course. So it was like a 1-week basic course, but they wanted us to be instructors in it. So they sent us to the 3-week like full-on instructor course, which was a lot more in depth. And so the culminating thing was like 2 days out in the field with, they gave us partners from sniper school, and the sniper school guys would have like spotting scopes and stuff. And you would work with the snipers to watch this village that was full of actors. And each actor had like a specific role they were playing, and your job was to watch them from like 300 meters away or further and see how they interacted with each other and try to figure out like who the bad guys were just based on how people interacted with each other. It was really a cool school and everything. I had a great time doing it. And then I came back from that 3 weeks to my company, and I walked in the door, and they're like, hey, you got orders. And I was like, what? I got fucking orders?
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, you're going to Fort Bliss, Texas. I was like, fuck. I called up Branch, and I was like, why am I going to Fort Bliss, Texas? I've only been in this unit for like a year and a half. And they're like, yeah, but you've been at Fort Benning for like 7 years. I was like, yeah, but I've only been here for like a year.
No.
And they're like, it doesn't matter. You got to go to a new unit. And this unit needs NCOs, and you're an E5, so you're going to go there. And so I got orders. Yeah.
So at that point, you were still in E5.
Yes, I just got pinned E5, but I had 7 years in the Army at that point.
And all those years you were operational.
Yes. I was in regiment for 6 years, and then that last year I was in 229.
God damn.
So they were like, all right, well, you got to go to 1st Armored Division because they need NCOs because they're about ready to deploy.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, fuck it, let's go. My wife was not happy about it because she's from Columbus. So she was leaving all of her family in Georgia, and we kind of like boxed everything up and fucking drove to Texas.
Yeah, and then right after that, you got word that you might deploy, right?
Yeah, and I showed up. I kind of knew I was hoping I was going to deploy. I was like, oh man, let's fucking. I was a little nervous at first, but I was like, this is a year-long deployment. I'm sure it won't be bad, and I'll get a lot of money out of it.
Yeah.
So I showed up to 1st Armored Division, and the in-processing took like 3 weeks. And because I was in E5, I kind of could do whatever the fuck I wanted. Like, no one really cared.
Yeah.
So it'd be like, you show up for the formation in the morning, and then be like, all right, well, you're not processing today, so we'll see you later. So I finally got my unit. I ended up going to 2-5 infantry, which was in 3rd Brigade, 1st Armored Division.
Okay.
And I went over there, and like as soon as I walked in the door, they're like, "Hey, we're going out in the field like day after tomorrow for 30 days." I was like, "Fuck me." So like within the first 3 days of getting to 2-5, I was out in the field, and it was kind of shitty, because it was El Paso, it was Texas, and it was winter time, and so it was snowing and raining and shitty, and we got rained on. So we got rained on so bad the first night I was out in the field. We got rained on so bad that one of the companies had put their command post in a wadi. They didn't realize it, and they woke up and were like under 2 feet of water. All their shit got fucked up. Tarantulas everywhere. Like, it was fucked up. But I was really kind of happy with the platoon that I was in. I had a really good platoon sergeant. He was an 82nd Airborne guy. He knew what Rangers were, and he was like, "Hey man, teach us everything you ever fucking got taught in Ranger Regiment. Make us the best that we can be." And I was like, "I'm all for it." And so he was grooming me to take over for one of the squad leaders that was leaving. It was between me and another E5, and we were both team leaders for this one squad leader. And that other E5 during that training event AD'd his saw. And so they were like, "Oh, you're the squad leader now." I was like, "Okay, I'm the squad leader now." And
so if there's viewers out there that don't know what an AD is, that's accidental negligent discharge.
Yeah, he was cleaning the saw, but he forgot to clear it. Yeah. And he opened up the feed tray, and the bolt went forward and fired off a round. So yeah, I got the squad leader position, and I kind of ran with it, and I had a really good time in that platoon. I ended up going to the VNOC, or they called it WLC, the Warrior Leader Course.
Okay.
And it's pretty much like what you have to go to get your 5. But I obviously didn't have to worry about that because I got my 5 without going to it. And I went there and I fucking dominated the course. It was fucking easy. Like, my instructors were like, "How many deployments do you have? How long have you been in the Army? Why are you only in E5?" And I was like, "Well, I didn't have my tab, and can't get promoted in Ranger Regiment without your tab. So here I am. It's year 7 in E5 still." They're like, "What the fuck, man? Like, you should be a fucking sergeant first class." Well, and they ran me through the whole thing. I got like the sergeant major's coin. It's the size of a frisbee because I taught all the pogues how to use a compass. Because none of them knew how to use a compass.
Yeah.
But I went through that course, and while I was in that course, I got two new guys. One of the new guys, I still talk to him. He's a great friend of mine. The other new guy was a fuck up. But got two new guys. The one fuck up new guy had to go to the hospital like the first day he was there. So I got a call from my team leader that when I was in WLC, he's like, "Hey, Sergeant, we got two new guys, and one of them's already in the hospital." I was like, "You gotta be fucking kidding me." But I did went to NTC with that platoon. The problem that company had was the company commander was a moron. He was dumb. He was a really bad company commander. He was trying to go to RASP 2 because he wanted to try to go to Ranger Regiment. And he came up to me, I'm an E5, and he's like, "Hey, do you know anyone over at RASP 2 that you can put a good word in for me?" I was like, "Dude, I'm a fucking E5. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what am I going to go talk to the fucking RASP 2 cadre and be like, 'Hey, my CO's coming through. Give him a break, guys.'"
Yeah.
He's a fucking moron. He almost fucking he got a whole platoon notionally killed on in NTC, and he's the 100% reason our company did not deploy because they did not trust him.
Yeah.
He got fired pretty much because he landed a helicopter in the middle of a fucking village, and they got squad wiped before they could even get off the fucking bird. It was embarrassing. And the worst part about this whole thing in NTC that happened with the landing the helicopter in the middle of the village, it was October 3rd.
Holy shit.
October 3rd, 2013. And this motherfucker lands a helicopter in the middle of the village and gets them all fucking squad wiped. I'm like, you're fucking dumb, dude. And so our company, they were like, "Hey, Bravo Company, you guys aren't deploying." And we were like, "What? We're not deploying?" And they're like, anyone that wants to deploy, go volunteer. We'll assign you to any other company you want to deploy. And I was coming up on my E6 board, and my first sergeant told me, "Hey, you're getting your 6. You're going to E6 board." And so I could have gone to another company and waited for my E6 board, or I could have stayed and got my E6 right then. And also, I was kind of having a bad feeling about the deployment because I'd been on so many where nothing had happened or like I hadn't been hurt. It was kind of like, do I really want to roll the dice with a leg unit?
You thought your luck might dry up.
Yeah, and so I was like, "Man, I'm not doing that shit." It just so happens that Sergeant Major Barreras was our battalion sergeant major. Well, Sergeant Major Barreras, he was RRD in regiment. He had spent his whole career in regiment. This was his first time outside of regiment, and he got shot in the leg, and he ended up dying of a air bubble in his leg after he got shot in Afghanistan with 1st Armored Division.
And so that was Sergeant Major Martin Barreras?
Yeah, Gunny.
Okay.
He was our sergeant major in 2-5, and yeah, he got killed. And I was like, "Holy fuck!" Like, not saying that it could have been me, but it's like you start realizing that you roll the dice too many times, and that stupid shit. I mean, simplest shit could fucking happen.
Yeah.
And so the whole, half the company fucking moved to other companies, and they deployed. And I got put in to, be the platoon sergeant because I was coming up on my 6. So I was pretty much an E5. And they're like, "Hey, you're going to be the platoon sergeant for a little while." And so I ran the platoon as a platoon sergeant probably about 2 weeks as an E5.
Yeah.
And finally got my 6. And the first sergeant came and sat me down and was like, "Hey, we're putting this other guy in charge of you because he's got more time and grade than you do." And I was like, "Yeah, but I got 10 times more experience than this dude," but it didn't matter. So this guy became my platoon sergeant. He fucking hated me.
Yeah.
He hated me because I had a scroll. He hated me because my team leaders were mean to people. He didn't think that being mean to privates was good. I was like, they're my team leaders. They can do whatever the fuck they want. And he was like, no, you have to like help these privates out and all this other shit. I'm like, no, like if the guy's a fucking moron, he's a moron. Like I'm not going to sit there and change how my team leaders lead because this guy complains about shit. That's not how that works. But he fucking hated me. So he tried to get me shafted out of the Army for hazing because he tried to say that I was hazing privates, which I wasn't. So he tried that. I got my 6, and I had to spend that whole fucking year under this dude. It was the worst time of my entire career, and probably the worst time of my life. Just in terms of messing with my head, losing all my confidence and shit. Yeah. It was very depressing for me to go through with that. And so the guys came back from the deployment. Actually, no, they were still deployed, and they came out there and told us, hey, your brigade's getting shut down. Like, you guys are no longer a brigade in the 1st Armored Division. You're getting sent to all different battalions now. Okay. So they shut us down. And when they did that, I never have seen wanton waste like that in my life. They were out there throwing shit in the dumpster. And so I snatched up as much as I could, like targetry and pens, pencils. I mean, I got a whole stationery of shit that they were just throwing in the dumpster, like brand new in the package. And so then I got sent to 136 after they closed down Q5 and closed down that brigade. They got sent to 1st Brigade, 1st Armored Division, 136 Infantry. And I kind of showed up there, and the first day I showed up, I had just gotten eye surgery done, or I was going to get eye surgery like the first day, but they say, hey, go out in the field, kind of meet the guys. So I go out in the field and I meet the guys, and I come back, I get my eye surgery done, and I find out that the platoon sergeant and 1st sergeant just got fired because they got in a fist fight in the field with each other. Sure. So the 1st sergeant's gone the first day I'm there. One of the platoon sergeants is gone the first day I'm there. So that was my first experience with them. And then I, was on 30 days after I got eye surgery. So I have like a 30-day profile for that. And I show up in the unit and we start training. They're pretty good dudes, most of them. They weren't bad guys. One of the team leaders was a 18 series guy he was an 18X, and he got through selection, and he was in Q course for medical, and he got dropped from SOCOM. Okay. So he was a really good dude. He was really smart, really squared away. He was one of my team leaders. And so we kind of were going through the motions of going into the training cycle, and we had our battalion ball. So I was like brand new to the unit, so I went to the ball, and our platoon sergeant got drunk, and this dude was like crusty, like been in the Army for 20 years, but PTSD'd the fuck out. Yeah. And he was making a scene at the ball. It was like, what the fuck is going on here? Because like apparently the deployment before I got there, they had some guys get killed who got sent out on some stupid mission by the battalion commander. And so everyone in the unit was really upset with the battalion commander. Yeah. And this platoon sergeant made it known that he was upset because he was really drunk. So that was really embarrassing to see that happen. And kind of, that was like, hey, I'm brand new to this unit and this is what I'm seeing. And then our company commander. Not a good sign. Yeah. And then our company commander got relieved for a while because he had a sexual harassment claim put against him. So he was gone. So we were a company without a 1st sergeant or a CO. So we finally got a 1st sergeant that showed up. And I thought he was like, oh, this guy's annoying. He's a dick. It turns out he's a former Ranger who had been RFS'd back in like the 90s. Okay. And I found out that 2 of the other platoon sergeants had also been in Ranger Regiment, and we all kind of like clicked in terms. They were much older than I was. They were all in like 40s, and I was still like 28. But they were like, "Hey, you're gonna kind of split time as platoon sergeant because the one platoon sergeant that caused all the problems at the ball, he got med boarded, and so it was me and this other dude that were like kind of like splitting time as platoon sergeant. Because I don't think we ever had a platoon sergeant even when I left. And we went through a training cycle. I think the story got out there somewhere, but someone was talking about the guy that got shot with the 50 cal. So we were out there doing striker stuff, and one of the other platoons was up there shooting, and I guess the gunner misidentified what he thought was a target. Turned out to be a OC Humvee, and he fired the 50 cal at the Humvee, and the round went and bounced around inside the Humvee and like landed on the guy's neck.
Oh.
So we all thought he'd been actually shot because, again, radio calls. OC's been shot by a 50 cal, and we're like, "Oh shit, that dude's dead. We're going home."
Yes, you thought it was just like he was dead.
Oh yeah, we thought we were going home. We thought the whole thing was going to get canceled and we were going to go home. That did not happen. It turns out it just rolled down his neck.
Oh shit!
Yeah. And then we did Iron Fuck Us, is what we called it. It was Iron Focus, but we all called it Iron Fuck Us.
Yeah.
So 136 was a striker brigade, striker battalion, and that we went out there and did Iron Focus. We popped every tire in Fort Bliss for strikers. Like they had no tires left. During that 30 days, we ran out of tires. It actually got up to Congress because we had blown through all the tires in the entire unit.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Kind of goes to show you that strikers aren't really meant to be used off-road.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then...
go ahead.
But yeah, so that was kind of like the big thing that we did in that unit. And it was kind of at that point, this would have been around 2015-ish. I started really having problems with my back.
Yeah.
Really kind of making things more difficult for me. And we were coming up on a deployment in that unit. And my PL was like, he was like 20 something years old. He was a brand new lieutenant. But he was like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm just having a lot of issues with my back." And he was like, "Hey, dude, like, I know you're tough as fuck and you've been through a lot, but you need to go talk to someone about your back."
Yeah.
And I was like, "I guess." He's like, "You think about this. We deploy and you have an issue with your back and like we're in the middle of something, like you're holding everyone back at that point." And I was like, "Yeah, that's true. I could, if I had like a back spasm that puts me out of the fight, I could fuck everyone up."
Yeah, exactly.
So I went to my the 136 Battalion surgeon. Well, the PA. It was a PA. And I went to him and I was like, "Hey, sir, I think I need to get med boarded because my back is not panning out like I thought it would." And he's like, "Are you just trying to get out of PT? Are you trying to get out of going out in the field?" I was like, "Sir, can you look at my records?" He's like, "No, you're just trying to get out of the fucking field." Like, he like literally thought I was just trying to get out of the field.
Yeah.
So I had a buddy that was the battalion sergeant major's driver, and I talked to him, and he was also so. The running theme here is Ranger Battalion opens up a lot of doors.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the guy that was the sergeant major's driver was a former Ranger too. So he's like, "Hey, let me help you out." So he took me to our brigade surgeon. And the brigade surgeon was like, "Hey, how can I help you?" I was like, "I'm having some issues with the PA, thinking I'm like malingering."
Yeah.
And the battalion or brigade surgeon was like, "Let me pull up your record." He pulled my record. He's like, "Why the fuck are you still in the Army?" I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, Well, I see here you got recommended for a med board back in 2012. And this was 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
And he's like, why are you still here? I was like, well, I kind of didn't follow through with the med board. And he's like, and your PA saying that you're malingering. I was like, yeah. So he called up the PA like in front of me. And he was like, hey, I'm sending you an email. This guy's going to come in tomorrow. You're going to fucking talk to him.
Yeah.
So I go in the next day and the PA's like, well, I looked at your medical records and yeah, you're pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay.
You're just like, all right.
So he's like, hey, I'm going to put you in. I'm going to recommend you for a med board. The process is going to take a while. So I'm going to recommend to the sergeant major that he put you in a different job.
Yeah.
So sergeant major was a former Ranger, dirtbag guy. So I went up and I talked to him, and we kind of talked about people that we both know. And he was like, I need a guy to take over as the barracks liaison guy. And you want to do that? I was like, sure. And I had a dude with me that was one of my team leaders in 136. I was like, can I take him too? Because I'm getting med boarded and you're going to need someone to take over after I leave. And he was like, yeah, sure. So I grabbed my buddy and I pulled him out of his fucking shitty position, brought him up there with me. And we fucking went through and did barracks O&O like you never seen before. We were finding dudes that were living in the barracks that had been out of the army for like 2 years. They're still living in the barracks rooms. And we were finding dudes that hadn't cleared their barracks rooms. We were finding like full issued shit in these guys' rooms.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, mine now, because these dudes had been out of the army for years at that point, and their shit was still in the rooms.
Yeah.
And there was one dude that we went into his room. He had like taken all the furniture out. I don't know what he did with any of the furniture, but he took all the furniture out, like a king size bed in there, and like made it look like an apartment. So, but we had gone through all these fucking rooms, and we like did a great job updating everything. And then I started going through the med board process, and eventually they were like, hey, your med board process is getting complete.
Yeah.
And got the med board stuff back, and they're like, hey, 30%. And I was like, 30%? Are you fucking kidding me? And then luckily I was able to get sleep apnea. I was able to get that service connected. So I'm at 70 right now. I'm still waiting from the VA for updates on that stuff right now. But so I didn't get retired. I got severanced.
Yeah.
So as an E6, when you get severanced, they do it like your highest amount of pay times 2 times the amount of years you were in. So I got like $68,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
Severance. And got out of the army. And so before I go into like what I did since I got out, do you guys have any other questions about like my army time?
I mean, personally, I don't. I feel like that was a pretty good overview. Unless you want to go over, like while you were deployed overseas, did you see anything that you might call, heroic or valorous? And it doesn't just have to be from, guys from your team, but anything that really stood out to you still does stand out to you today.
I mean, obviously the guys that, went out there every day. Every time we went out there, I always felt like we were doing the valorous thing, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
I would say the medics that worked on Stevenson, that shit was some of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life in terms of life-saving capability.
Yeah.
If you think about someone getting shot in the head and literally half their skull being gone and then being alive, that in of itself is some of the most amazing shit I've ever seen. And, I will say our medics, growing up in the Ranger community, and then when I was, my mom always told me, because she knew what Rangers were and she knew the type of people. She was like, if you were deploying and you were deploying with regiment, I was never worried about what was happening to you.
Yeah.
Because I guess kind of one thing I didn't kind of point out too is my dad ended up going to Afghanistan later on. So he got, when he was out of the army, and everything, and he was working for the government, the biometrics were becoming a thing in Afghanistan, and he volunteered for a pay reduction and to go to Afghanistan for a year and run the biometrics division in Afghanistan for the DoD.
Wow.
So he went to Bagram and he spent a year in Bagram and drove around between Bagram and Kabul as a civilian contractor, but a DoD civilian. So he was able to wear a uniform and stuff, and he made sure to put his Ranger tab on there so that people knew that he wasn't just some guy.
Yeah, of course.
He wanted to make sure that everyone knew that he was a retired colonel, not just some random dude.
Yeah.
But so when I was in Iraq, my dad was in Afghanistan, so you can imagine my mom.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I saw our medics do some pretty amazing stuff. All the guys I was around with, I unfortunately, that deployment that I was with First Platoon, I missed out on a big operation that my platoon had gotten into, where a lot of the guys got Arcoms with Vs and Bronze Stars with Vs.
Yeah.
They got in a huge firefight, and all of them, every one of those dudes, I can look back on and say that they put the work in. They were great guys, every single one of them. I can't think of a single dude, even the team leaders that were assholes to me or treated me like shit. Even the guys, the Spec 4s, when I was a brand new private, that were Spec 4s, what they're supposed to be, mean.
Yeah.
They still put in the work, and I still respect every single one of them for what they did.
Of course.
So, yeah, I didn't get to see anyone get a Distinguished Service Cross, or, I didn't see anyone get a Silver Star, but I knew a lot of guys that did. So,
okay.
So yeah, but I've seen some shit that not many people get to see.
Yeah, of course. So, before we, I guess, end the episode, or try to wrap it up at least. I don't want you to feel rushed or anything, but I guess my final question would be, if you woke up tomorrow and it was 2005 again, or whenever you turned 18, or joined the military, do you think that you would go back and do it all again, or would there be things that you would change or do differently? Or
I think the only thing that I would have changed, and I can't really say that I would change it, but if I could, I would have gone in right out of high school. I would have gone in 2003.
Yeah.
Because I think if I would have came right in, there would have been a bit more but then I can't really say, honestly.
Yeah.
Because there were a lot of times between 2004 and 2005 that there was really nothing going on, depending on where you were and what you were doing. It all kind of came down to where you went. So I honestly don't think I would have changed anything. Everything that happened to me, all the not going to Ranger School. That thing, I can sit there all day long, and some people will say, "Oh, you never went to Ranger School? What the fuck, man?"
Yeah.
But in all honesty, a lot of dudes only did 4 years and never went to Ranger School. A majority of people in Ranger Battalion didn't go to Ranger School. You'd be very surprised, especially back then. You know, privates, it wasn't like you showed up and then you went right away. You had to wait, you know. Sometimes you would wait until you're about ready to get out of the Army. So, and then you get a lot of guys that like did 1 or 2 deployments and they had their tab and they're like, man, I'm badass. And I'm like, bro, I did 7 deployments. Like, just because you have your tab doesn't make you anything better than what I did.
Of course.
You know, but I do regret not getting it. I do. I regret double gloving when I did.
Yeah.
But those things made me who I am today, so I can't really say I would change anything because I'm happy with who I am and I'm happy with what I did.
Of course.
You know?
Of course. And just one last thing before we end. I want to try to do a thing with this podcast where at the end of every episode, the guest can speak on maybe like a program or foundation that means a lot to them. And if we do ever get proceeds, like monetization from this podcast, we'd like to give back and, you know, donate those proceeds to Veterans Foundation. So for your part, is there anything that means a lot to you that you would like to, you know, just briefly speak about? Or
I don't really know of too many like organizations. I know there's the HOA organization, the HOOAH.
Yeah.
I know that they do stuff, and I know there's the All Clear. They do stuff as well. I'll just say, kind of delve into a little bit of what I've gone through since I've been out to kind of give a good idea. I will say that anyone, whatever you did in the military, whatever you did during that time frame, never feel like you can't go and talk to people about it. And like, I'm very open about what I went through and kind of my mental health situations and stuff.
Of course.
You can't go through it and not talk to people about it. You can't go through it and kind of bottle it up and think that it will go away, because it doesn't go away. It doesn't leave. And it makes things more difficult later on. And you know, there's a certain podcast / show that I watch on YouTube. I'm sure you know who it is, but I watch a lot of that, and you see a lot of, you know, special operations guys on there.
Yeah.
And a lot of them talk about issues that they've had afterwards.
Of course.
And I noticed, you know, when they were talking about stuff, it was very similar to the things that I've been going through since I've been out. And a lot of it has to do with especially in Ranger Regiment, the amount of times that you deploy in the training cycle and its kind of effects. There's a lot of times in the regular Army, they'll deploy for a year, but then they'll spend 2 years at home.
Yeah, of course.
In Ranger Regiment and in SMUs, you don't have that, and it really kind of messes up your life, your mental state. And so I encourage, like, I talk to my guys. I still talk to most of my Ranger buddies, my guys that I was in battalion with. I talk to them all the time, and I always tell them, you know, like, don't try to tough it out, and don't try to like push through it, because you can't.
Yeah, it catches up.
It does. It will kick your ass before you know it, and you don't want. And when it does kick your ass, you don't want to be in that spot.
Yeah, of course.
So, I've started to look into mental health because I've been having issues, and I'm so glad that I do it. You know, I'm so happy. Yep. It's done a great deal to help me. So, yeah, I guess that's what I would say is, you know, anyone, it's not to discourage anyone who's intent on joining the military, or getting into Ranger Regiment or an SMU or anything like that. But just understand that the amount of work and the amount of stuff that happens in those units and in your life, you really have to understand that you may need to get help.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I think the main thing that a lot of people fail to realize with these organizations is that, it's not just, you go to selection and then you show up and then, after that, it's just easy going. A lot of people like to say that, selection is never ending, right?
Yeah.
So when you're in these units and you're trying to spend, years at a time there's a lot of time where you only see like people that you want to see like a few days every few months, because you're always at the headquarters, you're always deploying, and maybe not as much anymore, but you're always going to be at work doing something, right?
Yeah.
So I definitely feel like it's important for people to fully comprehend, what they're stepping into before they actually do it. Like it's really a dedication or a commitment. It's lifelong. So
yeah, and the other thing is that save your money. When you're young, save your money.
Oh yeah.
I didn't really have that mindset because deploying all the time, you really don't care about your money because you could be dead the next day, doing that type of stuff. So you never really put the money in, you never really put stock in money.
Yeah.
But I wish I had. It's one of those things where you realize later on that it would be much better to have it than not. So,
of course.
But, any other questions or anything? Comments?
I mean, on that note, I kind of feel like we pretty much covered every base.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're good to go. It was really great to sit down with you, be able to share be able to hear your experiences, because there's a lot of people who got, I don't know, I would say there's a lot of people that got left, feeling like what was our purpose in the Middle East for the past 20 years, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
the thing that a lot of people don't comprehend is that, soldiers are an extension of the government, of course. Like that's just always how it's going to be. But, when we invaded Iraq, a lot of people, they were just going off what they were being told by their chain of command. So, when guys invaded Iraq, they didn't know that there wasn't WMDs there,
Yeah.
So I definitely feel like it's really important to sort of hear like the firsthand accounts, because a lot of people tend to forget that, the guys that go out there and do that sort of stuff are humans too. They're just like me and you. So,
well, I think what I can kind of lay out simply is I had the opportunity to get out after my second deployment. I could have gotten out. Actually, my first deployment, after that thing was over, you don't necessarily, I mean, I could have started to get out of the Army right before my next one. But you have this mindset of, if other people are doing it still, why should I get out? And I always felt like that. I didn't want to leave and stop deploying until all my friends were done. And that's what happened. My last deployment, all my original friends from battalion had gotten out.
yeah.
They were no longer deploying. Unfortunately, other friends, continued to be in and continued to end up getting killed.
Yeah.
Later on, but it was my main squad, my main friends in my squad. That's who I stayed there for, and that's kind of what I think a lot of soldiers have, is they have the people that they're there next to. I never really cared about the politics of why we were there. I cared about the people that were there next to me, and kind of being there. And why did I join? I think is what a lot of people ask me. You know, did you join because of 9/11? Did you join because of whatever? I joined because it was the right thing to do. In my life, in my upbringing, you know, my father was an Army officer. My grandfather was an Army officer.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, this is what we did in my family. It was kind of how you dedicate yourself to the country, because the country provides everything for you. So
absolutely, man.
I didn't do it to go and fight in Iraq or Afghanistan. I would have joined either way, you know. So that's me personally. I would have been in the Army even if we didn't have a war. But yeah.
All right, man. Well, fair enough on that part. Well, like I said, I really thank you for, you know, taking the time out of your day to just come down and record the episode. Like I said, we definitely want to take this project to higher levels. So every episode counts for sure. Aside from that, I mean, I don't really have anything else for you. The only thing else that I would have for the listeners is, you know, once again, thanks for your support. If you guys could, you know, like, share, comment, and then definitely subscribe to the channel to you know, see upcoming videos, that would be awesome. So like I said, thank you again, Dylan. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I hope you have a good day, man.
Yeah, you too.